Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Dorset Police and Crime Panel meeting. My name's Mike Short. I'll be chairing this today. We've got a number of new panel members today, so unusually I'm going to get all panel members and then PCC's team to introduce themselves, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Starting with Alistair.
Good morning. I'm Alistair Keddy. I am the BCP councillor for Queen's Park Ward.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Patrick Canavan. I'm a councillor for Boscombe West in Bournemouth.
Good morning. My name's Ian McVie. I'm one of the two independents on the panel.
Right. Trying to press a button that wasn't a button. Tony Trent from BCP Council from Alderney and Bourne Valley and Poole.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor David Flagg, BCP Council, representing Burton Grange Ward.
Morning, everybody. Les Fry, representing Dorchester West.
Good morning. Councillor Pete Barrow, representing Radipole Ward in Weymouth, Dorset Councillor.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Dorset Council, representing Hillforts and Upper Clarence Ward.
Morning, Peter Sidaway, BCP Councillor for Broadstone.
Thanks very much, chaps. And if I could ask PCC to introduce his team as well for panel members.
Good morning. Well, first of all, I'm Dave Sidwick. I'm the Dorset Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm accompanied by Simon Bullock, who is my Chief Executive, by Julie Strange, who is my Chief Financial Officer, and by Adam Harold, who is my Director of Operations.
Thanks very much, David. I'd like to thank also outgoing members. I know they're not here today, but also for their service to the panel over the years. Councillor Dove, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Haynes, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Rigby, and Councillor Howell. And I think that gives a good indication of the turnover that we've got for this new panel as well. I'd also like to thank Mr. Ian McVie, who it is his last meeting today. Ian has served on a panel for 11 years now, indeed from its inception. I think it's fair to say his input to the panel has been quite remarkable. The panel would not be in its mature state now had it not been for Ian's dedication, hard work and professionalism. He's led on formulating panel policy from the very beginning when there was none at all, well, not at the local level. Countless spotlight scrutiny reviews, which in some has provided the PCC with free consultancy, and has been highly effective as the chair of the complaints subcommittee for the Police and Crime Panel, where his astute understanding of the complaints processes and his ability to cut to the crux has been invaluable. And all of this has been underpinned by his excellent sense of humour, which has kept many of us going when events were getting turgid and flagging. He'll sadly be missed by all, especially me, because I've come to rely on his sage advice, guidance and wisdom. I think it's enough said on that. From all past and present members, Ian, may I thank you and wish you good luck and good health for the future. And I'd like the panel to show its normal congratulations in a normal manner for Ian's service over the last 11 years. So thank you very much, Ian. Testing, testing, testing. Right, moving on. There's obviously a bit of a glitch with cameras, so the public can't see me. Oh, I'm back on. Excellent. Highlight, bonus all round. So we now move on to some internal panel business. The Vice Chair, Councillor Bobby Dove, is no longer on the panel, so we need a new Vice Chair. Could I seek a proposer and a seconder and a show of hands for the Vice Chair, please?
Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Les Fry.
Chair, I'd like to second that, please.
I think something's still on.
Hello? Yep, wrong. Okay. Thanks very much. So I need a show of hands for endorsing Councillor Fry nomination. We've had the nomination. No, there aren't any. Thank you. Anybody disagree? No, thank you. I'll put my hand up in agreement. Thank you very much. So therefore, I welcome Les Fry as Vice Chair to Dorset Police and Crime Panel. Thanks very much. Les, would you wish to join me up here? All right, moving on to item 2. I trust you've all read the minutes of the last meeting. Does anybody have any points they'd like to raise from those minutes before we move on to the actions? No, thank you. Mark, actions, please.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a number of actions coming from the last minutes. First of all, the PCC to report back on the Force's Gold Group findings on 101 and emergency response.
Chair, I am very happy to report the Force has now responded to this challenge on emergency response times. And we are pretty pleased with the outcome here. This represents a very good example of the benefit of raising a formal challenge with the Force. Our inquiry clearly pointed out a deficit with the way the data was reported. And Dorset Police has now taken advantage of understanding best practice from other forces and has amended its processes accordingly. In summary, like other forces, Dorset has given itself a target for responding to Grade 1, the highest priority of emergency calls for service, within 20 minutes. Now, this data was previously measured as being measured from the time of the call being answered to the time of the officer arriving on scene. Now, some forces measured this data in exactly the same way, whereas others started from the point that the officers were dispatched. So that meant that comparisons between forces were difficult. Dorset has now changed its process and measures both answer time, as described, and response time. So the time from the point of dispatch to the point of arrival. By clearly measuring both times, we now have greater transparency and opportunities to examine both control room performance and also the local policing response. Now, the work has also considered a wide range of other factors, which I'm not going to get into here, but it includes things like resources, systems, infrastructure, and a relative use of different contact channels. And ultimately, what this has resulted in is a new performance measure being adopted. This is an ambitious but achievable call answering to dispatch target time of 5 minutes and a dispatch to arrival target time of 15 minutes. So that means that the overall response together is 20. The new target will be monitored through the Strategic Performance Board, which is attended by my Chief Executive. And a range of improvement to the call handling process have resulted in a speedier process there. The latest stats are that 81% of Grade 1 emergency calls are dispatched within 5 minutes, and that officers arrive at 77% of such calls within 15 minutes, which is also an improvement on the previous position. And now that this has been unpicked so we can see exactly what's going on, we'll be able to measure it more closely going forward, looking for more improvement. Thank you.
Okay, and the next action was looking for an update on local implementation of the From Harm to Hope drug strategy.
Thank you. So the From
Hello, good morning. Just to follow up on what you just said, is there any science behind the 20 minutes arrival time? Because I mentioned why I asked that. The fire service did a lot of work with Exeter University on fire survival times, and it was proved that the attendance could be within 10 minutes from time of call. Your chances of survival was much improved. If it went past 10 minutes, then obviously it started to get worse. I just wondering whether there's anything in the police world that can sort of equate to that.
Thank you, Councillor Barrow. Yes, there is. Basically, what Dorset Police did was they benchmarked themselves and had a look across the country, and national best practice is the 20 minutes. Now that we've actually got that in place and the two elements are buttoned down, we'll be able to drive for future improvements. But we needed to basically unpick it the way that I explained. So it's national best practice. So if I revert back to the second action, which was to update on the local implementation of the From Harm to Hope drug strategy. So for those who are not aware, the From Harm to Hope 10-year drug strategy came about because of Dame Carol Black's amazing 2 reviews on the drug market in this country and also the issues around what could be done about it. The From Harm to Hope drug strategy clearly said that you needed 3 things. You needed to address drug supply, you needed to strive for a world-class treatment option, and you needed to basically cut off the demand for the future. I would put it a different way. I would say you need tough enforcement, you need effective treatment, and you need impactful prevention. But it is a similar set of directions. How that is enacted on the ground is through something called a combating drug partnership. And these were set up roughly a year ago now. They are headed by a senior responsible officer, and I take that role for Dorset. And they bring together multi-partners. So this brings together everybody who could possibly help in combating drugs in our county. It brings together the criminal justice system from the point of view of probation, from the point of view of prisons, the police. It brings together health, it brings together drug commissioning services, it brings together lived experience. But it also goes wider, looking at bringing together education, bringing together housing, bringing together job centres. So the Combating Drugs Partnership was set up. We have 4 subgroups in Dorset. One is an analytical subgroup, and their purpose was to put together a needs assessment, which we did, and also to drive for outcome measures. I'll come back to those a little bit later on. The other 3 subgroups are, as you would expect, they are enforcement, they are treatment, and they are prevention. And for each of those, we have both national performance measures and secondary measures which abut behind them. We hold quarterly board meetings. We make certain that basically we drive for those outcomes. So to give you just a sense of some of the things that we're driving for. From the point of view of treatment, Dorset has hit its treatment targets. We also have a measure regarding, for example, the number of prisoners who are into drug rehabilitation and substance misuse therapy. We are one of the highest performing places in the country for this. We also have measurements such as in the enforcement section regarding number of county lines disrupted, number of disruptions made overall. And I can tell you again, we are one of the highest performing areas in the country, with Dorset ranking 4th when it comes to organised crime disruptions. So there is a number of things which are moving forward with this. We're reporting on a quarterly basis, as I say. We've now managed to recruit a Combating Drugs Partnership business manager in order to drive this work forward more extensively. And what I'm really pleased about, and what is amazing, I will pay tribute to our partners here, is the way that all the partners have come together on this joint endeavour to make a difference for the people of Dorset and have co-funded this CDP manager. Now, separately to this, Chair, there was also a specific action on providing panel members with the measures of success that will be used by the CDP. My office updated the panel that the further guidance for the Drug Strategy National Outcomes Framework was published on the 23rd of May, and shared that both the headline and supporting metrics will be used to monitor progress towards these outcomes. Hopefully, members have now had the opportunity to see the National Outcomes Framework that Dorset, alongside all other local areas, will be adopting. And part of my work is as the co-chair of the Addiction and Substance Misuse Portfolio for PCCs. As such, I sit on a bi-monthly ministerial meeting which discusses the combating drugs partnerships, how they can be more effective, how they can work better, what more we can do in this space. And that allows me to make points for Dorset, but also to make certain we are at the cutting edge of any new innovations which come forward. So I think that gives you an overview and an update of where we are with From Harm to Hope drug strategy locally.
Okay, and the next action was looking for an update on Operation Soteria Bluestone.
Thank you. Well, this is a very timely question, given the announcement yesterday by government that Operation Soteria will be extended to all police forces in England and Wales, following a successful pilot in 19 forces, including Dorset. Now, Operation Soteria started in Avon and Somerset. It was originally called Project Bluestone, and it was launched as a response to the government end-to-end rape review. And the Home Office pledged to increase the number of rape cases, making it to court within this parliamentary term. When I saw this data, I lobbied extensively for Dorset to take part in Operation Soteria. And when it was expanded, we were part of the second tranche of 14 forces that have been operating for a year. Building on the initial work of Avon and Somerset, the Project Bluestone banner also had the input of the first 4 Pathfinder forces. Soteria is a police academic collaboration aiming to combine a strong police practitioner knowledge base with a strong academic research foundation, with the aim of developing a new operating model for the investigation and prosecution of rape capable of national rollout. So what are the elements and what does this actually mean? So the principles of Soteria is that it's a suspect-focused investigation, including the disrupting and challenging of repeat offenders. It uses procedural justice to underpin victim engagement. It's placing investigated knowledge, learning, and well-being at the heart of improvement. And there is a systemic use, analysis, and exploitation of data. And as Soteria moves forward, there is a sharing of that data across all the forces. In a bit more detail then on each of those, the suspect-focused investigation, without getting too academic, Chair, it recognises the fundamental importance of understanding human psychology in achieving a successful court outcome. And this has swiveled. It is now about the offender. So this includes a better understanding how offenders select, groom, and exploit their victims, and identify their vulnerabilities. How they attempt to assure investigators and prosecutors and exploit not only the preconceptions and ways of thinking of investigators, but also the realities and weaknesses of the criminal justice system to evade justice, enabling many to repeat and refine their behavior time after time. So this clearly is not only looking at the suspect from the point of view of catching them, it's also understanding how they could potentially game the system. A greater perpetrator focus powered by this understanding and underpinning improved case building will be the key difference in achieving better outcomes, and emerging learning in this area is being shared with our investigators and programmed into national training. What procedural justice means is that it relates to the idea that fair processes and people's perception of fairness is strongly impacted by the quality of their experiences, and not only the final outcome of these experiences. So it is the whole journey. Psychology is also therefore very relevant when it comes to victim engagement and maximising victims' ability to cope and recover. The role of independent sexual violence advisors, which the panel has heard about before, are critical to this, and we are ensuring this emerging learning is fed into our ISVAs and into MAPLE, Dorset Police's in-house domestic abuse advisor provision. We talked about investigator knowledge and capability, where it's clearly critical in achieving successful outcomes. And there is more than just a formal learning program here. That will have been informed by Soteria Learning, and it was trailed in the pilot form, but it also includes core reflective practice at every stage of the investigation process as a discipline and daily habit. This way of working has proven benefits for well-being too. The value of undertaking this reflective practice as a wider group, including the other key players in the prosecution system, is considered to be a significant benefit, and that also is being advocated by Soteria. You can see if the perpetrator is going to game the system, it's important that everybody in the system has an understanding of how that could be done. The exploitation of data. Policing recognise that it must invest more time and energy at a corporate and system level on data and analysis. This means using data in an intelligent and forensic way to make certain that the gaps, the blockages and pinch points are understood, to analyse root causes, and then to take action on them in an evidence-based way and to evaluate the effect on that system of that action. Data is very much a critical asset, and Soteria has now set out further opportunities for policing and our partners to make the most of the data we hold to drive better outcomes. Finally, and this is really important, Soteria is helping to better understand and address police culture and drive performance improvements to victims. Although police culture is often seen as a monolith, the reality is that there are often 3 separate subcultures at play around this issue within forces. One is culture 1. It consists of individuals who are not yet bought into VAUG being a priority. They must actively be engaged, informed, and ultimately changed. Culture 2 are the change agents. They are actively involved and support the drive of policing improvements in VAUG. They must be recognised and rewarded. And culture 3 are those people who are new to policing, of which we have a good number, and who may not yet have a clear or informed view. They very much are our future, and we have to make certain that we bring them into culture 2 and not the somewhat old-fashioned and out-of-date view of culture 1. Overall, Operation Soteria is offering policing an opportunity to not to be defensive about what's happened before, but about identifying and addressing opportunities for improvement, to recognise the benefit of working closely with our prosecutors, with the DAA and the ISVA colleagues, and to move past the past. Chair, what this really goes to the hub of is conviction rates for RASO are nationally very low. And no police and crime commissioner, or indeed chief constable, would say anything other than they wish to see many more perpetrators brought to justice, and they want to see this improved. Now, I was heartened by the report in the Echo recently of a 20% increase for prosecutions across Wessex, so Hampshire, Wiltshire, and Dorset. Now, all those became Soteria forces at the same time a year ago. There are early signs that some progress for Soteria forces is occurring, whether that be by more timely charging decisions or better file quality, alongside some slightly improved outcome rates. But we must recognise that this is a complex issue, and RASO cases can take many years to work their way through the CGS. And so it may be some time before we fully understand the benefits of the work, and of course I will keep members informed. And it also abuts with my work as chair of the criminal justice system, where we were looking at the pathway of a victim of sexual assault or rape and how it can be improved in order to make certain that we keep more people engaged throughout the whole process and get more prosecutions. So thank you very much. That's the third action.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Sherry-Jesperson. A quick question which you may or may not be able to answer today, but it's perhaps later on you might be able to come. So it's excellent that Dorset took part in the Operation Soteria pilot. There is arguably no more important matter for the police forces around the country to get to grips with than this whole area of work. Now, one of the benefits of participating in a pilot is the opportunity for insight into our own forces' particular outcome and performance. So can we know at the end, when this was evaluated at the end of the pilot, how did Dorset Forces' performance compare with the other pilot forces? And were there any particular areas of learning which for Dorset from this activity? Again, if you can't, you might not be able to answer that today, but I would be glad to know at some future date. Thank you.
So as clarification, we weren't in the pilot forces. There was 5 of those altogether, including Avon and Somerset. We were in the second tranche of 14. Now, those are basically evaluated on an ongoing basis, and we get reports back from the Operation Soteria system, if you like. How that compares with other forces, I am not aware of at this moment in time. We will look into that and come back to you.
And then finally, for the actions, we had a couple of additions for the work plan, which is serious violence, duty legislation and domestic abuse, which will be added to that plan.
Thanks very much, Mark. Just for the public information, the cameras are not working too well, so I understand, so bear with us. If I could ask Mark to, 1, to go back to item 1, apologies, and then 2, lead off with item 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So first up, we have apologies from Councillor Kirby and Councillor Carr-Jones. And then moving on to the declarations of interest. It's just an opportunity for panel members just invited to make any declarations that are necessary to ensure compliance with the Code of Conduct. So is there anything to declare? Okay. Thank you, Chair.
And moving on to item 4, public participation.
There are no questions today, Chair.
So moving on to item 5, which is the quarterly monitoring report, which is the meat of this meeting, which gives the PCC a chance to update the panel on progress on his police and crime plan. There's been a long gap between the last meeting in February and this meeting today. There have been a number of issues that have been raised both nationally and at the local level in quarter that the panel would like to take forward with the PCC before we actually start on his quarter 4 monitoring report. So if I may, I'll just lead off with the first question. Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, has stated that he will order his officers not to attend mental health incidents unless life is at threat. This panel has discussed in the past the what will no longer be done question. Should the Chief Constable approach you stating that she's going to pursue the same operational policy as Sir Mark, which is within her mandate, what action will you take with other agencies in order to minimise the impact on the NHS? Second question is, how have you ensured the Chief Constable pursues the right care, right person approach? And the third question is, HMRC FRS recently stated that our force has been asked to work with mental health services to improve the decision-making process for frontline officers when they're dealing with mental health incidents. What oversight of the Chief Constable have you had in undertaking, or what oversight of the Chief Constable have you undertaken following this HMRC report? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. What I'll do is I'll take the first 2 points together and deal with the third in a minute, if I may. Recognising that this work is still subject to wider development, and that I will provide a fuller update to the panel in due course once the detail of the national rollout of the right care, right person approach is known. I'll start by explaining the work underway in Dorset to identify, articulate and address the wicked issue of mental health demand. Firstly, and this is important to state, policing is a 24/7 service, is often regarded as a service of both first and last resort. This means that police officers are often required to manage individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. Whilst officers will continue to be supportive, considerate and compassionate in those circumstances, individuals would be served best by an expert response that police officers are simply not trained to deliver. Not only does this let down the individuals experiencing a mental health crisis, their family and friends, but also police officers and staff upon whom we place an unnecessary and unfair burden. Policing has for many years now carried this additional burden and dealt with the inevitable failure that these intolerable situations bring. Deaths in police custody of those experiencing mental health crisis, individuals being taken to hospital or mental health facilities in the back of police cars in handcuffs as opposed to in ambulances with specialist staff, and individuals released from police custody only to find themselves back there 3 hours later as they have been unable to access mental health services. All of these are unfortunately disappointingly commonplace occurrences the length and breadth of this country. And again, for many years now, policing has sought to pick up the pieces of a lack of specialist mental health services and put in place their own mental health triage approaches, often jointly staffed with health colleagues and running at peak periods of demand in peak areas. At some point, a line in the sand has to be drawn. And this is where the Right Care, Right Person project comes in. In 2019, Humberside Police, because of the issues they were facing in this area, convened a multi-agency task and finish group, attended by senior executive and managerial representatives from local authorities, mental health providers, acute hospital trusts, ambulance trusts, CCGs, clinical commissioning groups, and third sector charities and organisations, with the focus of their work being to reach an agreement between health and social care partners and the police that ensured that those with the right skills, training and experience responded to the mental health related calls for service. I'd like to take a moment longer on this point, if I may. The story around the Met's announcement focused on the headline. What it didn't do is talk about the considerable work that sat underneath that decision. The principles of RCRP suggest that there must be improved multi-agency and partnership responses to mental health-related incidents, and that the public will receive an improved service provided by those who are better able to access subject matter experts and appropriate specialist support. Whilst a reduction in the numbers of inappropriate attendance at mental health incidents by police will also be achieved, the critical deliverable is improved service delivery to the public. As you may guess, I am a strong advocate of this model, as is the Chief Constable. Although the Met has taken the decision to go early with RCRP, based on the work undertaken by Humberside, most forces, including Dorset, are waiting for the national guidance for the implementation of RCRP to be developed by the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing and disseminated to the forces. This, we now believe, is imminent. As said, Chair, I will ensure to update panel members further on this important initiative as it continues to develop. The third point then, I believe, was in relation to the HMIC FRS inspection visit to Dorset Police Custody Suites, published in May. The report highlighted that, and I quote in full, "The force and mental health services don't have good enough arrangements to deal with people with mental ill health. Frontline officers called to incidents in public places can't always get the support they need from mental health professionals. This potentially leads to people being detained under Section 136 of the Mental Health Act 1983, when other more appropriate solutions may have been available. Detainees wait too long for a Mental Health Act assessment in custody when required, with further waits before they are transferred to a mental health facility. There is very little information and no monitoring to show how well the needs of people with mental ill health are met, and little joint work to try to improve outcomes for them." You will note that the HMIC FRS are making the same argument that I have just articulated. Their recommendation was that, and again I quote, "The force should work with mental health services to make sure people with mental health are dealt with appropriately and their needs met. This element will be addressed by RCRP." There were other elements related to data collation and care provided within the custody setting. And like other HMIC FRS recommendations, my team formally raised these with the force and seek a formal response, which I then may need to discuss further with the Chief Constable. This response is currently in the process of being drafted, and in the interim, my team have also discussed this report at the regular meeting of my independent custody visitors scheme and their views on this issue have been fed back to the forced custody inspectors. Very clearly, this goes to a dilemma. I'm clear that the people of Dorset, and indeed the force themselves, said to me that they wanted to be crime fighters, to do the job, to uphold the law, to prevent crime and catch criminals. And there are issues here which go beyond that. And for those people in mental health crisis, there need to be the right caregivers. Very clearly, the Humberside pilot showed us the way, and I'm confident we can deliver both for Dorset as a whole and for the individuals in crisis by adopting this approach. Thank you.
Ian.
Obviously, the RCRP is a new model, but, and I may have got this wrong, so you feel free to jump on me, but as I understand it, for the police service, they've got an overarching model called Thrive, which is to do with threat, harm and risk. So it's fine that we've got a new strategic model that can be followed. There are some issues about how that's resourced, but that, I think, will at times come at odds with the Thrive model, which currently dictates that if the police fail in that area, the individuals are responsible for that who've made the decision not to follow the national model. And this seems to me that there's a national strategic conflict there. How are you as a PCC, with your PCC colleagues, going to address that and facilitate that we don't end up with two conflicting models banging heads, and in the middle of that are people who are still mentally unwell?
Thank you, Mr. McVie. And you have, as ever, gone to the nub of one of the issues which has been part of, if you like, the delay in getting this landed. This was worked through, that exact conflict was worked through by Humberside Police as part of the pilot. The Met Police have taken on the role of looking at the legal situation around exactly that conflict and how that gets worked through. I've taken advice in order that the protocols, and this has to be completely protocol driven with a lot of training, are addressed to make certain that that conflict doesn't exist. So that's why I said that the Met Police had gone early. They have. They've been able to do that because they've got all that information. They understand the legality which needed to be sorted out. They've got all those pieces in place. We are waiting for that to come, as I say, from the College of Policing, but that is a critical element within it, and that has been worked through in order to address that conflict.
Sorry to labour it a bit, as usual. But the Thrive model is still in existence. As I understand it, would not be going. But it will put the individual staff member making decisions on the phone about who to dispatch, and the people who've been dispatched, they potentially have a conflicting thing there, don't they? And without being crude about it, the Thrive model trumps the RCRP model if you're an individual police officer or a member of staff, because if you fail on that and there's a complaint or a disaster comes out of it, you're subject to some pretty intense investigation, which is right, but I still think that I'm just not quite sure how the existing Thrive model, it could potentially be a bit of a blocker in the practicalities day to day, bit operational that bit, but you as a PCC, politically and strategically, that's your job to try and clear that blockage, which suggests to me that Thrive might need a review.
I'm going to hand to my chief executive as he has got a bit more of the detail around this. What I will say though, Ian, just before I hand over to Simon, is I'm very clear that where there is life at risk, the police will still go. That doesn't change. But we need to see the detail. So I'll just hand over to Simon from that perspective.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr McVie. You are right to an extent. So Right Care, Right Person, the toolkit that's been developed by Humberside works alongside Thrive. So Thrive is threat, harm, risk, investigation, vulnerability and engagement for colleagues that may not know. So that also works alongside the National Decision-Making Model, the NDM. So essentially there are a number of systems and processes in place that, in this particular case, control room operatives will have to make sure they account for. So under Right Care, Right Person, Humberside has developed a toolkit for force control staff that makes sure they've got the alignment of Right Care, Right Person, Thrive and the NDM all together, alongside the legal guidance that Humberside has undertaken to make sure that policing doesn't step into territories whereby it does go to cause itself issues. The point here is that, and actually it is worthwhile stating that the police do not generally owe a duty of care under common law to protect individuals from harm, either harm caused by themselves or by others. So although that the police do have a responsibility to step in for law investigation and protection matters, where the police omit to act, it is unlikely that they will have breached a duty of care. And this is the legal guidance that, that's been undertaken, it's been accepted by the NPCC, it's been currently worked through. As I say, that does have an element of controversy about it, and it will need to be worked through with partners, which is why, as the Commissioner alludes to, the process of implementing Right Care, Right Person in Humberside was very much a partnership approach. The existing joint protocols and working relationships with ambulance trusts and mental health trusts will need to be worked through and updated. That clearly hasn't happened yet in Dorset. We're waiting for national guidance in order to help us work through those. But there will be packs that will be developed and sent through to partners. It'll be a long process to work through all those joint protocols and working arrangements. But the plan will be that there will be Right Care, Right Person guidance, which will take into account Thrive, take into account the legal obligations and take into account the national decision-making model. It will be complicated, though.
Thank you very much. I think it's also worth noting at the same time you've got a new Mental Health Act bill going through, and that will prohibit the use of police cells as a place of safety. So that will be interesting to see how that pans out. Sherry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson. Commissioner, last month, a number of Dorset police officers were sacked for sharing racist, sexist and homophobic messages on WhatsApp. In the light of this case, how has the PCC, how have you held the Chief Constable to account for delivery of the Police Race Action Plan and other relevant strategies and action plans? And also, what action have you taken to remove the possibility of any case like this happening again in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jesperson. Let me start by saying, as I've said before, there is no place in Dorset Police for anybody who is racist, sexist or homophobic. I expect, as the public do, that Dorset police officers are held to the highest standard. Let me start by saying that following the outcomes of the misconduct hearing, my senior team and I have received a briefing on the details of this case. And I very much welcome and indeed agree with the misconduct panel's decision. The sanctions that have been placed on the officers that have been found guilty of misconduct are appropriate in the light of the evidence that was presented. I also welcome the clear leadership shown by the force in this matter, and I note that the apology made by the Deputy Chief Constable that the behaviour of these officers let the public of Dorset down. It did. Not only did they let themselves down, they let the public down, but also their colleagues. Alongside the force leadership, I remain very much committed to Dorset Police investigating any unethical or unacceptable behaviour within its ranks. And I continue to encourage members of the public to report any experiences of wrongdoing or a falling in standards by officers to Dorset Police. In terms of my own activity, as members will recognise, this is largely managed through my scrutiny of force governance and strategy. Dorset Police has a well-established governance framework encompassing an examination of areas such as performance, legitimacy, disproportionality, and equality, diversity and inclusion. And these are attended by my chief executive or my director of operations. My team identified opportunities for further improvements to be made in respect of Dorset Police's consideration of these important areas. And as a consequence, I have raised these concerns to the Chief Constable and sought a remedy. My chief executive has worked closely with the Deputy Chief Constable to address the concerns, and Dorset Police has tweaked its governance structure and produced a governance handbook, something which did not previously exist. I mention this process to demonstrate how my office and I add value and hold the force to account for improving services. In addition to this scrutiny as part of business as usual, I issued a PCC challenge on vetting to seek reassurance that this was robust for both new recruits and for transferees. I was assured by the response provided by the Chief Constable, albeit we both agreed to remain vigilant. I advocated for sufficient monitoring of force ICT systems, both desktop and handheld devices. And I'm pleased to report that required software is now in place, is being fully utilised, and that there are clear routes to follow up any resulting intelligence. I've also recently agreed to enhance the role of my team and how we play a part in scrutinising the use of police powers within Dorset. As a next step, I'm further considering opportunities to enhance the role we play in the complaints system. This includes the review and appeal function, dip sampling of complaints, and liaison with the IOPC. I am familiar with a lot of the work that Force has done in order to allow members of the force to call out issues around misogyny, racism, and sexism, and homophobia. I'm also very, very clear that there will be more work to be done. In common with all the forces across the country, there has been a deep dive into Dorset Police to ensure that we do not have a Carrick or a Cousins as part of our personnel. What I'm clear about, though, and I actually did this, I asked the Dorset Police Head of Professional Standards whether we could prevent such cases arising in the future. He was very honest and said an outcome that no one can promise. Whilst the Chief Constable and I will do everything we can to minimise the opportunity of similar cases arising in the future through the levers which we have, the fact remains that they will, in every force, in every public body, in every organising and institution, because human beings are flawed, there will always be some who have biases and prejudices. But it is in the moment when we have been able to expose these that Dorset Police will show its mettle in how it deals with it. I'm satisfied that this case in particular has been dealt with correctly, and we'll make certain that as we go forward, whatever may come, it will be dealt with correctly for the good of the people of Dorset. Thank you.
Following on from that, if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner. So what actual discussions have you personally had with the Chief Constable in order to hold her to account for the delivery of the police race action plan?
So from the point of view of the police race action plan, my office has basically reviewed that. We've looked at where issues may remain. We've just had a further framework through from the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. My team are looking at the framework to make certain that there are no gaps. And I raised this, and they raised this, through the Legitimacy Board and other boards within Dorset Police. And I speak to the Chief Constable as appropriate for any gaps which may remain. For example, one of the issues which I know is very much a hot issue, and connected with this is, for example, stop and search. And I'm somewhat reassured that my new Chief Constable is the national lead for stop and search and is looking at that intently as we speak. So I hope that helps.
Sherry.
Thank you for that answer in two parts. Mr. Chairman, through you, is there any way we can flag this up for something to come back to this agenda so that we can have, because you've given us reassurance of what you've done to this point. What we might also like is some reassurance in some months' time, 6, 9 months' time, that sort of timescale, to have a further report as to because it's easy to say we've done these things, isn't it? But then we have to make sure that they've become embedded. These are changes to culture, and they're not things that are done quickly. And the same with the race plan. That's ongoing business. Could we have that on our agenda for a deep dive, perhaps?
Yes, we can, Sherry, and we have already logged it based on conversations last week, and we will come back to that again. And there's something else I was going to say as well. Intercom. So thank you very much. And Ian.
I know we touched on this subject before, but it seems to me that, again, right at the crux of things as well is the vetting and re-vetting processes. Whilst there's been much huffing and puffing by 43 police forces, you sit here as a member of the public and think, that's great, everyone's wringing their hands and telling us how terrible it is. But are they actually now doing better vetting? And are they definitely doing re-vetting, which would include, quite rightly, reviews of social media usage and even phone usage as well?
So the issue around social media in particular, that was one of the reasons why we're looking at the monitoring of ICT systems, but also my understanding is that is now part of what's occurring. Do you want to say some more, Simon, about this?
I was just going to very quickly mention the historic data wash, which is a lovely police acronym for the revetting of all police officers, police staff, and actually was also included, all OPCC staff were also included in that. So every police officer, police staff, volunteer, and OPCC worker have been revetted in the last 3 months nationally.
That's the one. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I think coming back to what Sherry was saying, what you're actually seeking is evidence of effect. We're getting a lot of, this is what I'm doing. Well, let's see if it's having a positive effect. Thank you. Thank you very much. And also it's worth highlighting that the Met have solved this problem by rolling out 29,000 new mobile phones, so I understand, which don't have the capability of doing WhatsApp. Well, that's fact or fiction. I'll let you find out. Ian.
Sorry, it's just one other thing. Obviously, with the re-vetting, as I understand it, if someone fails re-vetting, on that alone, currently, they can't be dismissed. So what's the position for the PCC and APCC in terms of supporting what I think is most probably going to be a drive by chief constables to actually have within legislation that if someone fails re-vetting, that they effectively have committed gross misconduct and they'd be dismissed?
Well, my understanding is that following the data wash for Dorset, I haven't heard of anybody failing the re-vetting. I don't know if, no. So nobody has failed that here. I would be basically supportive of that person leaving the force if they were not passing the re-vetting. I think we have to be very clear. I said it earlier. Police officers hold themselves to a higher standard. The public expect them to do that. Vetting is important. That's where I am with this.
Thanks, Commissioner. Thanks, Ian. Pete.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pete Barrow. Dorset has been chosen as an area for a pilot scheme for tackling antisocial behaviour, named the Immediate Justice Scheme. Can the PCC please provide a succinct outline of this pilot, the duration and what involvement his office will have? The scheme is also aiming to give victims of antisocial behaviour from the local community a say in offenders' punishments. How will this be moderated? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and be succinct, Chair. Government published its ASB action plan in March. Launching the strategy, the Prime Minister said it was determined to restore the public's confidence that those responsible will be quickly and visibly punished. You will be aware that antisocial behaviour is one of the things that I am passionate about trying to drive down in Dorset, which is where immediate justice could come in. Immediate justice is a programme aimed at delivering swift and visible punishment for ASB, diverting people away from the criminal justice system and making sure offenders undertake practical reparative activity to make good the loss or damage sustained by victims. So it's very similar to the existing community payback scheme. Under this initiative, offenders will be made to work under supervision, maybe to pick up litter, remove graffiti or tidy parks or other communal spaces as punishment for their actions. And victims of ASB from the local community will be given a say in those punishments. I'll say a bit more here as it was asked. The practice of restorative justice is well established, both in Dorset and through our commission provider and nationally. As a result, there are clear process and guidelines about what constitutes appropriate reparative behaviour. And those are discussed with both offenders and victims as part of RJ's schemes. Now, with regards to immediate justice, the OPCC will be engaging with victims about the types of reparative activity that will be proposed. This detail, though, is not yet available, but will likely fall into the types of activity I've already highlighted. If we go back to the immediate justice initiative itself, the government ambition is for this reparative actions to start 48 hours after an offence has been confirmed and notified to the scheme. So this will be based on the existing powers that police have to issue out-of-court disposals with conditions to undertake reparative action. And the expectation is for officers to continue to use their discretion and national guidance to decide which offences were appropriate for this disposal and the conditions that should be applied. Excuse me. 16 trailblazer areas were announced at the same time of the strategy, some focusing on immediate justice and some benefiting from additional funding to surge the policing response in hotspot areas, and some having both. There was no prior notice that Dorset would be chosen, but we are one of the 10 immediate justice areas and are expecting to receive around £1 million to deliver this initiative this year, which is a significant amount of money to come into Dorset. The government intention is to roll out IJ and hotspot policing to all force areas from next year. So we have an advantage being a trailblazer area. Number 10 have asked the trailblazer areas to get up and running to some extent this month and that they are fully operational by October. This is a very ambitious timescale, which has been somewhat hindered by the fact that the Home Office and the DLUC officials are currently writing the detail of the initiative as we speak. So the development is somewhat complex. Once we know the detail, we'll be able to move forward at pace. Overall, my position is that this is not something that we would have necessarily chosen. Indeed, I said very clearly face-to-face that I'd rather have the hotspot policing money, but this is £1 million, which we can use. But we will nevertheless maximise the use of this to enhance our local services and improve public confidence and assurance in this particularly important area for the people of Dorset. So that's £1 million that's coming. We've started very much having a lot of work talking to our partners on how best that we can use this and what initiatives would be part of it. We are just waiting for the detail now in order to be able to drive forward. I hope that gives you an outline of what I know at this stage.
Thank you for the response. That sounds interesting, because as you rightly point out, antisocial behaviour is massively, massive concern to residents. I think it's the thing I get the most contact about overall. We'll just have to wait and see what comes out of it, but I'd hope that it's not going to put a huge burden on our police officers, that they're going to be, running the various activities which are going on with these people who've got themselves in trouble.
You're absolutely correct. I don't want this to be an additional burden on police officers, but we also need to address antisocial behaviour across our county. So we're working through that at the moment with other partners. Put it this way, I don't see that it will be the police officers who are administrating the people doing the reparative work at that time. That is not a role for a police officer. But we'll work through and see how we get there once we've got the detail.
Can I just clarify that £1 million is going to your office or elsewhere?
The money is coming into our office.
Excellent, thank you. Patrick.
Councillor Patrick Canavan, the Home Office is conducting an internal investigation to examine the circumstances surrounding the murder of Tom Roberts in Bournemouth, apparently by an asylum seeker. What action has the PCC taken to lobby for this report to be issued in order that Dorset can take forward lessons identified to keep people safe?
Thank you. Well, appreciating that we've got a number of new members since our last meeting, Chair. Some of the returning members may recall that I made a statement at the beginning of the meeting in February very clearly about this. And basically since then, I have written to the Home Secretary at the end of March, highlighting the murder of Tom Roberts, which created not just local but also national press and political interest. And specifically that I was seeking her public assurance about this matter and regarding the vetting of the individuals expected to be housed in the Portland Port Asylum Ferry. A fortnight later, in April, I repeated my concerns to the Policing Minister, copying the Home Secretary, our two local parliamentarians to Bournemouth, the Dorset Council leader and the Chief Constable into my letter. I also had communication with Dorset Coroner's Office in response to their concerns, which highlighted the actions I'd taken, encouraging them to also lobby the Home Office in the same manner. I'm disappointed to report that my letters remain unanswered on the specific point about Tom Roberts, and so I took the opportunity of being in a meeting with the Policing Minister to raise my concerns in person and follow up by private email. A response was going to be chased up. In the end, what actually happened was I saw on May the 11th in the press that in response to this concern, he basically said that there would be an internal review which wouldn't be made public. I have kept on lobbying around this. I've now had an answer back from the Home Office relating to the vetting of the accommodation vessel inhabitants, and I am content that that vetting will be done in an appropriate manner, and it is in the way that I would expect. But on this matter, I have yet to hear specifically, on the specific matter, I haven't heard back. Now, I understand that the coroner has asked for an answer by the end of June. I have written to the coroner's office actually yesterday and said very clearly, have you had an answer? And I will continue to press. I have another opportunity later this week and I'll ask in person if it could be made public. And we'll see where we get to. I'm more satisfied about the accommodation vessel vetting, but as ever, I still think that the lessons learned and that review should be put in the public domain. So that's where I am with it.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Which leads us nicely into the next question, which is, with the imminent berthing of the ship in Portland, what action has the PCC taken in order to secure additional funding to cover the potential upswing in policing demand, and how will this funding be utilised? And how has the PCC engaged with local authorities over the provision of assurance? You've answered the latter question, I suspect, already, but I'll let you crack on.
So first of all, I will briefly answer the last part of that question. I mean, since we knew, and by the way, there was no consultation in advance with any of the authorities. This was suddenly announced to the local authority this was happening. They then told the Chief Constable, who advised me. Since that moment, Dorset Police have been planning for the contingencies necessary around the policing for this accommodation vessel. And that has been extensive. You know the saying, you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst. That's exactly what they've done. We've been in lockstep with the local authority and the NHS regarding this in order to make certain that all aspects of the infrastructure is required, because like other people, I've been very clear, the infrastructure is not and was not in place in order to make this work. I am reassured by the Chief Constable that now we are in a position to be able to move forward in a manner which is correct for what we need, should and when this accommodation vessel arrives. And if I gave an actual readout of the actions I've undertaken to secure the appropriate levels of funding, I think we'd be here to Christmas, to be honest. Certainly we'd spend the rest of the meeting. So I'm going to summarise a bit. In the first instance, I asked the Chief Constable to give me the likely costs of what might fall to Dorset Police. This wouldn't only encompass the local policing requirement, but also planning and in partnership engagement processes needed to facilitate the success of this initiative. They have been planning literally since that moment. All that has a cost. And the intelligence, community cohesion, reassurance, and wider communication needs also have to be factored in. The Chief and I then submitted these indicative costs to the Home Office for their consideration. I would characterise the Home Office response as lethargic and somewhat confused. There seemed to be, initially at least, a lack of understanding that this was not just a hotel, but actually a novel situation. And with the community rightly clamouring for information, I was robust and I turned the screws over a period of a few weeks, wrote to the Home Secretary, the Policing Minister, the Immigration Minister, various Home Office officials on this matter. My team and I have also had several meetings with the Home Office officials, and I've lobbied ministers directly through my usual engagement with them. Long story short, Chair, the current position is that the Home Office has finally agreed to provide an initial level of funding that matches our original ask. They've agreed to fund the costs of any requests for mutual aid that Dorset Police initiates in support of policing the accommodation vessel, and they have critically agreed to consider requests for further funding should the vessel stay for longer than the year for which the initial funding has been provided. As I'm sure both members of the public will be interested in the relevant sums, which are, firstly, for community policing, which I and the Chief Constable felt was a really, really vital factor in going forward. We started with a request for £520,000. There was a lot of arm wrestling because they only wanted to give us £375,000. It is now back to where we wanted it to be. £520,000 in line with my request at the start. The Home Office has also agreed to reimburse Dorset Police for any mutual aid costs that is liable for in support of the policing of the accommodation vessel. That is critical because that is expensive should it be needed. Both of these are limited to an initial period of 12 months. Although the Home Office has stated that should funding be required beyond this period, that would be discussed and considered. I am, in common with my partners locally, trying to get a firmer commitment around that. In addition to this, the Home Office has recognised that there may be new demands on police capability and capacity deriving from the accommodation vessel, and that funding may be required to cover this additionality. The option therefore remains open that the Chief Constable and I will issue a further bid to the Home Office should further costs be identified. And I've been very clear that if we do need to do that, we will make it very clear that these costs are associated with the accommodation vessel, and we will also have a very clear expectation on behalf of the people of Dorset that central government should pay this. This is an incredibly complex, challenging issue, and I pay tribute to my team as well, because this has taken a lot of time to wrangle this over the last few months. I continue to work closely with colleagues in policing, local authorities and health to ensure that both the totality of the funding allocation to Dorset and the individual funding allocations to each agency are appropriate. We're all in this together, and the system needs to work together. I appreciate very much, and I'm frustrated by, the fact that the community had been left in the dark as we tried to extract information from the Home Office. Indeed, I was very clear and direct in some of my correspondence that they needed to come to Portland, and I was grateful that they did, even though the questions may not have satisfied the people of Portland. For the moment, though, we are where we are. I'm content, and the Chief Constable is content, that the initial concerns have been addressed. I absolutely expect to be putting in a further bid, and I remain determined that the cost of this exercise will not be borne from police budgets already, and it will be paid for centrally. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I suppose the quick key question is, how will the 520k be utilised? It's not going to pay for additional police officers, is it?
You are, of course, absolutely right. Additional police officers would take 38 weeks to be trained. We know that. So at the moment, there is a plan in place to work through with that. I'm not going to give the details here because operationally, that's the Chief Constable's gift. What I've been clear about, and we have a window regarding what's required, but I want it to be used rapidly and very visibly, not least for the people of Portland. And the plans of that are apace, but I'm not going to talk about it because that's operational for the Chief Constable.
Yeah, I get that. However, from the people of Dorset's perspective, it's fair to say, to use an expression from my background, the asset, you're going to sweat the asset even more.
Yes, I'm going to pass to Simon because I think you may have a little bit more detail which may be useful.
Not much, to be honest, Commissioner. The majority of the cost will be initially on overtime.
Thank you for that. Peter? Sorry, you've got a question, then a question.
Thank you. Pete Barrow from Radical Ward in Weymouth again. I'd just like to say thank you, to be honest. I mean, the fact this has happened and we've had no consultation and no warning, and this immensely disruptive situation has arrived in our area is just outrageous. And I realise that, like you've just said, you know, we are where we are and we need to do what we need to do. And so the thanks is to the police and all the other services for actually resolving the government's mess for them. And, you know, hopefully this all works out and everything is okay. But the initial situation was just outrageous.
Councillor Barrow, all I can do is echo that. I absolutely agree, and I have been equally frustrated. I've also been equally frustrated, if I'm honest, is our initial ask was done a significant time ago, and if that had been granted then, we would have been able to basically move forward faster. But as I say, we are where we are. We've got the money that we asked for. We've got some assurance about the future, and we'll go forward. And we have to make this work. We have to make it work for two sets of people. Those asylum seekers who haven't been asked to be put on this barge, but also very much the people of Dorset, and in particular the people of Weymouth and Portland. Thank you.
Next question. Data from Home Office has revealed the low number of crimes reported to Dorset Police between September 21 and September 22, which resulted in a prosecution. It's acknowledged that there is a need to improve the number of crimes where an offender is identified and held to account by the criminal justice system. How is the PCC holding the Chief Constable to account for the delivery of this improvement?
Chair, the issue of reducing positive outcomes rates is one which policing has been grappling with for some time now. Broadly speaking, here, we're in a safe county, the 6th safest, in fact, as I'm sure members know. We started off as 10th, we've got to 6th. However, with regards to positive outcome rates, our performance is still average. And I am, quite frankly, frustrated about that. As a result of this, the force has improved its positive outcomes rate as a key performance outcome this year. So now it is actually a real focus. It's being routinely scrutinised at the Performance Board, which is attended by my Chief Executive. And first, I'd like to give a brief context for new members. There are currently 22 possible outcomes for crime as listed in the Home Office's Crime Outcomes Framework. Some of these are considered positive in the sense that there is a tangible outcome that offers justice for the victim. For example, outcome 1 is a charge or summons. I think everybody would be familiar with that one, where a person is charged or summoned to appear at court. Everybody would understand that. Outcome 2 is a caution, where a person receives a formal police caution. And there are also a range of outcomes relating to warnings, e.g. for cannabis possession, for community resolutions, which might include the use of restorative justice, we talked a little bit about that earlier, or penalty notices for disorder, fines in other words. Then there are a number of outcomes where a formal action isn't taken, perhaps because the suspect or victim or key witness has died or was too ill to progress. Outcomes 5, 12, or 13. Or it could be because the CPS decided the case was not in the public interest to pursue. Outcome 9. Finally, there's also a range of outcomes where there are evidential difficulties, such as a suspect not being identified, outcome 18, or a suspect being identified, but there's not enough evidence to progress, outcome 15, or the suspect being identified, but the victim doesn't want to support further action, outcome 16. So these may be regarded as more negative outcomes. Policing therefore makes an assessment of positive outcome rates and actively tries to increase this in order to bring more offenders to justice. Over the past year, Dorset Police's positive outcome rate has been around 11%. Now, the upper quartile for the higher performing forces, it starts just over 13%. So at the moment, we are 25th out of 43 forces. Now, that's an unverified position pending the release of national statistics. My Chief Executive attends the force's monthly Strategic Performance Board, where these data are considered in detail. This is the first line holding to account mechanism, and any performance exceptions are then highlighted to me for discussion with the Chief Constable. I am aware of the improvement work the force is progressing in the space, covering both improving investigation standards, including timeliness, workload checks, outstanding crimes, outstanding suspects, and arrest rates, as well as a specific focus on driving up positive outcome rates on specific crime types, in specific locations, and at specific times. I'm also aware of the work being undertaken by the Make the Difference team. This is a bespoke performance improvement team within Dorset Police, which undertakes a deep dive into specific areas or issues to identify opportunities for continual improvement and marginal gains in police performance. This includes an examination of the better performance and how they use their arrests and community resolutions, how that affects their positive outcome rates, given the complexity I outlined earlier. As a result of this deep dive, Dorset Police is targeting maintaining its already high level of crime recording and data integrity. And that's critical going forward. We have to make certain that the crime recording and data integrity is absolutely spot on. But it is also about very much using that and understanding it to improve the overall positive outcome rate from 11% to 13% in the first instance to take us into that top quartile. There are also several thresholds within this for improving the positive outcome rate for specific crime types, but I'm not going to get into that level of detail here. But my team and I have looked at this for specific crime types. We do get reports on it regularly and are able to see the progress. Sufficient, Chair. I hope to say it's an area of performance that both the Chief Constable and I would like to improve. I'm aware of the improvement plan in place. My chief executive will keep me updated as we move forward through our usual methods of scrutiny, and wherever I see any performance dips away from that trajectory of improvement, I will be talking to the chief constable as soon as I can get into her, which is usually the following week. I think it's important to frame this as well, and also to frame what is the lowest limit. I have seen a positive outcome rate for a force of 6.4%. And this isn't anything to do with money. They are a very well-financed force. I'm very clear that I'm not going to worry about such matters. I'm going to make certain that Dorset Police will keep driving forward their improvement in this area. Thank you.
Does anybody have any follow-up questions on any of that at all? No, thank you. Thank you for your open and honest answers to those questions, those in-quarter questions, Commissioner. I'd like to move on then, if you wouldn't mind, to your quarterly report for quarter four. Conscious of time, but if you could give us the overview and then we can go into the priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what I'll do is I'll move forward through the police and crime plan, through the priorities. I'll take them in turn and deal with any questions after each element. So the first one is to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. I've already alluded to, when we talk about antisocial behaviour, I've already alluded to the issue of immediate justice and the funding which we are going to be getting into Dorset. What I also would like to talk about is a couple of other things as well. I'm not going to talk about the figures at the top. I'm very pleased that they are moving in the right direction, but I'm going to pick up on a few of the things underneath within the quarterly report. One of the things that I'm very clear about is that antisocial behaviour, for example, is complex. We know that there are some elements which some people would think that the police should be involved in, when actually it's the local authority. It is about partnership working in order to address them. And it is also about trying to get the root causes. So we know Dorset Police has Operation Relentless as a priority, which it did not have before this police and crime plan. That is now for every neighbourhood policing team, and it is part of their priorities going forward. We've also got to get the root causes. And that's why I put together the Operation Relentless Community Fund. Now that has operated twice already. The third time it was launched during the time period of this quarterly report. In the past, very clearly, we have managed to help over 21 places across Dorset. This is for community groups to apply for. It is not for councils. And what it does is it basically looks at what can be done for antisocial behaviour in a micro locality. So it could be, as we have done, CCTV on a church, and we know that that has reduced their antisocial behaviour. People may have seen in the press the fact that we helped put some CCTV on a youth club in Littlemore in Weymouth, and that reduced their antisocial behaviour by 80%. We know that we have, for example, blocked up alcoves in disused toilets to prevent drug dealers using them, to the delight of those who live around those toilets. But it's also about making a difference with our young people as well. And so we've also done, for example, extra skate park lessons for those likely to fall into antisocial behaviour. And that was launched again during this quarter. And we will shortly be looking at who's applied and how the third tranche will be applied across Dorset. And I will make the point, this very clearly is across Dorset. And where there is communities who are suffering from antisocial behaviour, I hope that they applied, and I hope that as we go forward, when we do it again, then they will apply again in order to get help on a local basis. So we've got the top-down, we've got the strategic, and we've got the very local. I'm going to take one other thing here, which is really the work of the Force Cyber Crime Officer. And what I'm very aware of with fraud and cybercrime is we have sort of everybody is affected, but there are two groups of people who the criminals target more than others. That is the elderly and the vulnerable. You've heard about my work in that space before. But in this occasion, we have the Force Cybercrime Officer and Bournemouth Uni working together to improve awareness in the student population. And we made certain that there would be attendance at Freshers Week. I'm very pleased that that occurred. And the last one I'll do about this is, in the past we've talked about road safety. I've talked about community speed watch. I've talked about cameras. But during this quarter, I was very pleased that we can actually make more noise for our younger residents about how to keep safe on the road. And we basically supported a competition called See You on the Road, which was held for young people aged between 9 and 16, basically to design a poster, social media image or animation that highlight the dangers in a way that would draw the attention of all road users. And I remember to this day, although this was a little while ago now, how good those entrants were and how pleased we were and able to review them and pick a really deserving winner. So I think I'll stop there, if I may, Chair.
Thanks very much for that. Priority leads are Pete Barrow and Tony Trent. Pete, any points?
Thank you for that. Well, very glad to see you working with the fire service as well on that competition to pick the winner. The one question is about shoplifting. So what action is the PCC taking in order to combat what might be termed an endemic in shoplifting? And it's something I've had quite a few emails from residents about just lately. And also practice, I think you referred to it as steaming or something similar, but it's where a large number of people go into the shop, they all nick something, they all run away. And it's from the tales I've been told, the shopkeepers are finding this very, very frightening.
Well, thank you, Councillor Barrow. This is one area which actually led me to be Police and Crime Commissioner. I saw it myself in a local shop. And I am aware, really acutely aware, that for whatever reason, and I may come back to that, we have a situation where there is more shoplifting going on. And having seen it myself, having talked to local businesses, having, dare I say it, chased 3 shoplifters down the road and given the information to the police, I'm very clear that this needs a multi-partner approach. I very much have put this on the agenda of Dorset Police. When I came into office, I created something called the Safer Dorset Business Partnership. That meets on a quarterly basis with chambers, bids, and now we're beginning to get traction with some of the larger chains. That example I talked about was actually my local Tesco, and because of that, I was able to speak to the regional manager, and they will be joining the Safer Dorset Business Partnership. What the Safer Dorset Business Partnership has is it has 3 main threads, with a 4th where basically it's me updating. The 3 main threads are trying to improve reporting. I'll come back to that. Basically better engagement with the businesses, prevention and cybercrime. Let me park cybercrime because we're talking specifically about shoplifting, which works into the other 3. The prevention piece is what can be done for those people who are doing the shoplifting. And that talks about the youth work to keep kids out of trouble. It talks about things like the Combating Drugs Partnership and addressing the addiction in our society. And that's fine. Though now what we're seeing is we're seeing a different sort of system of shoplifting, as you alluded to. And there is now more organisation, more stealing to order. And dare I say it, there are now other retail outlets which appear to be quite happy to take the stolen goods. So this means a number of things. Let me go back and just go through where the police are. So the greater engagement. There is now in place in Dorset Police, which there wasn't before, a business crime strategy. There is now also a business tactical plan. We know that when that is applied and applied to its fullest extent, targeting prolific shoplifters, we know that it works. One of the places that I was very acutely aware of was a Sovereign Centre in Boscombe, and one of the retail managers last year sent in a note to the Chief Constable saying that Dorset Police had basically saved over £200,000 for them compared to the previous year by targeting prolific shoplifting. So we know what can be done. We have to use every element we have in order to address this, and that will include working with licensing authorities around retail outlets who may be doing other things apart from receiving stolen goods. They may be giving alcohol to kids. We need that licensing to be tough, and Dorset Police will make those points, probably not about their suspicions, but if they find retail outlets with alcohol for kids, they will make those points about that to the licensing authorities and the committees and the local authorities. So I'm hoping there is support around that. It is about intelligence. It is about reporting. The more intelligence that can come in about any of the elements within the chain of some of this organisation stuff, it will be helpful. What I am trying to do with the Safer Dorset partnership is to look specifically about how we can improve reporting. Now, over the last 2 years, we've had a few back and forths about this. I basically identified, and I think it's still the case, that many retail outlets will not report shoplifting. So, for example, the retail chains will report upwards to management about what's going on, but it needs to come into the police in order that they can build the intelligence map in order to do it. And the complexity of reporting is something which does prevent them taking that opportunity. You've just had, I don't know, a bottle of wine taken. You've also got to spend time filling out a report and the bureaucracy around that. And it is trying to get past that, which is what I've been working with the Safer Dorset Business Partnership in order to try and achieve. What we have done is with Dorset Police, we've identified opportunities to improve the process. That is about streamlining, updating the shoplifting pack provided to businesses. We've also worked with the force to update the Preventing Theft and Shoplifting advice page on the force website. We've also looked at other things, a possible bespoke portal for business crime. But with the imminent upgrade of the Dorset Police website to the new national policing platform known as Single Online Home, that was not a direction which Dorset Police were prepared to go in. The new Single Online Home does allow for easier reporting. I used it myself with the incident I was talking about earlier. But we can go further. And I've been working with UK PAC, or UK Partners Against Crime. What they do is they offer a platform for businesses to share information and intelligence with each other and build a virtual community of retailers. That allows the intelligence of what the shoplifter looks like to be sent round the other shops in the area, for example. It would allow Dorset Police to put people they were worried about on the system, people to look out for. And with its ultimate system, it will help build packs for prosecution. I understand the bids have been in association with this, some of the business improvement districts, particularly the ones in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, and they will be looking to start up this platform. And I'm very clear that I will assist the bids in any way I can if they come forward with projects to me which make sense in order to address this issue. But I've also agreed with UK PAC that I will fund up to 200 businesses across Dorset to join this new platform. So it is a county-wide partnership to deliver these software packages to businesses. They will approach the chambers, possibly the smaller bids and businesses in Dorset to become part of this county-wide partnership and provide them access to the platform, training and support at no cost to them for 12 months. Why is this important? This is important because I've seen this work. I've seen it work in Portsmouth about how it links up, and gradually the shoplifters find that it's not very comfortable for them. Everybody knows them. Everybody's looking out for them. And they gradually move away from the areas that they were operating. This is a particularly difficult nut to crack, Chair. It's particularly difficult from a number of perspectives. I'm determined to bring back some hope for the businesses, for those who have lost heart because of the difficulty of getting on top of this. I'm determined that Dorset Police will, with a new business crime strategy and business tactical plan, be all over this. It's a particularly nut to crack. We've looked at other options. I'm confident that with this system, through a respected national provider, we've got a chance to make a real difference to shoplifting. And I'm looking forward to coming back after we've launched it, we've got it up and running, to be able to basically report to you the success of that scheme. So thank you for raising that really difficult subject and the importance of keeping the work up on it. Thank you.
Thank you for a comprehensive response. The only comment, I mean, it's good to see all that's going on, and it's really good to see that if what you might call the organised element of it is really being cracked down hard. But obviously we've also got a cost of living crisis going on, and that's driving some of this. So it'd be good to see a differentiation in the way those two situations are dealt with.
You are absolutely right, and it is the organised crime part to it, the organisation around it, which I'm very clear that we should be looking at all parts of that. You know, if you've got an organised system, somebody's taking your goods off you. And that's why that is cited with Dorset Police, and I will keep talking to them about it until we get better responses and a better result.
Alistair Keddy, Queen's Park, BCP. I just wanted to note that I attended the Bournemouth North Pub Watch group last month, and there was a presentation from UK PAC promoting Safer Communities, a crime reporting platform, and collective reporting and monitoring. I was quite impressed by what they presented, and so were the licensees present. Where you mentioned there's funding for 200 businesses, would this extend out of retail into licensed venues as well?
Thank you, Councillor Keddy. You are absolutely right. In fact, there is a pilot being used at this moment in the centre of Bournemouth with, I think it's 13 licensed premises. And my hope would that would be extended across others. Because in the same way that if you've got a shop and you're worried about shoplifting, and it's useful to know who it is who's likely to be attacking your business, it is exactly the same, particularly with the issues around violence against women and girls, and indeed all of our communities in the nighttime economy. It is also useful to have that, so for example, doormen could share it, etc. And that's exactly what Dorset Police are working with the nighttime economy. And you know, it's a pilot at the moment, but you know, if it works, then we look forward to rolling it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we swiftly move on to priority 2? Succinctly covered, please.
Okay. I will keep this brief then, Chair, because I do know that there's questions about it. I think the highlight, particularly of this quarter, was this is where we met and exceeded the officer recruitment target for the additional uplift for Dorset. I'm very pleased that there are now, well, actually, as of this moment, there's 1,401.7. By the time we finish this year, there'll be 1,441. I'm very pleased that this now gives a significant number of officers back into Dorset. It is the largest number of PCC will have had, but it was also about where they go. And I have been very clear that the majority have to be in community-facing roles in order to achieve the visibility, connectiveness and engagement which the people of Dorset want. And we've seen this increase. It's come forward, it's strengthened neighbourhood policing, it's allowed new teams to be built, such as the neighbourhood enforcement team, the rural crime team, the missing person team. And it's allowed other operations to take place, which we couldn't do before. I'm also going to take a moment to talk about community contact points, because it is also about where you can meet with your officers and talk with your officers. We now have, I think it's 29 community contact points across Dorset. These are drop-in style regular events where members of the NPT, neighbourhood policing teams, will be on hand to field any public queries. And actually, we've taken it a stage further now. You will have seen that there are now front offices coming back into being. Blandford and Lyme Regis are both being piloted as we speak, and there will be more. I'm going to leave it there because you asked me to be succinct, and that's kind of giving you the highlights.
Thank you very much for that. Just so from the public's perspective, I'll just clarify that whilst you may make recommendations where you would like those police officers to go, ultimately that responsibility lies with the Chief Constable. Is that correct?
You are absolutely right, because it is her operational decision to deal with the threats that she perceives. But I would be failing in my duty to the people of Dorset if I did not say what they wanted and what was clearly in the police and crime plan.
Thanks for clarifying that. Sherry.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions on this, if I may, very quickly. First of all, I'm particularly welcome the front counter pilot in Blandford Forum. I look forward to hearing more about that when you come to visit, speak to my parishes in September, because they're all around the Blandford area. My first question is then, I'm looking at the red arrow here, of course. The levels of satisfaction and the perceptions that Dorset Police are doing a good job are showing between 60 and 66%, up from the previous quarter, but the target is 80%. So could you say just a little bit about what action you're taking to improve this success measure to get it nearer to the 80%? Thank you.
Got there. Thank you. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's a good spot there. It's an area that the Performance Board, excuse me, took a deep dive into in May this year, as we were 1 year into new arrangements. So in May 2022, the long-running Community Safety Survey, for which this statistic is taken, moved to a new provider, SMSR, who already work with several police forces, local authorities and national charities. So for the benefit of new members, this survey is conducted over the phone with the provider randomly contacting individuals until 1,200 responses are gained each year. There were some minor methodological changes to the way the survey was collated in 2022-2023. And some further work was undertaken to ensure that data from 22-23 are comparable to the previous year's results. But I'm not particularly bothered by that. As the data is stated, it does reflect an improving performance position. Longer-standing members might recall that the data was higher during the COVID period. So 2020 to 21 and 2021 to 22, as the percentage of the public who felt Dorset Police was doing a good job increased considerably. That's where we kind of got the target from. From a 5-year average of 61% pre-COVID to an average of 77% during the COVID period. The position of increased confidence, reassurance and satisfaction in the police during the COVID period is also reflected in other measures from the same community safety survey. So if we discounted the data during this period, then when public confidence was, so that was when public confidence was potentially artificially high. The percentage of people who think Dorset Police is doing a good job has risen from 61% pre-COVID to 66% post-COVID. Therefore, at this stage, Chair, I'm content that this performance in this area is improving, and whilst the stated target of 80% reflects a historically high position, I'm very mindful of the wider challenges facing UK policing and how these can affect local confidence and satisfaction rates here in Dorset. That's not to discount these figures. We're driving hard to get up to 80%, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing about that briefly in a tick. But we recognise the scale of the challenge because we've also got national issues which affect people's confidence in policing. We've also got to make certain that everything that the police do, which is for us, which makes a difference, is publicised equally compared to when something bad happens. And that's something that I have taken a particular interest here in Dorset and spoken to members of the press about, in that you can't always be on the aggressive end of beating the police force. You also have to show and celebrate when they do a good thing to keep us safe. The way that this will change is by having those extra police officers into Dorset, by having them in the places they need to be, by having the new police and crime plan to change the culture and focus on what the people of Dorset want to address crime in their communities. It is that which will make this number go up. And I will hold the police to account for making certain the visibility and engagement and connectivity is there. I will hold them to account for putting in place those operations that we require in order to keep us safe. That's how we'll drive that number back up towards 80%. And it's encouraging that it's moved from 61 to 66. Thank you. Oh, and sorry, by the way, when I opened Blandford Police Station, in that hour whilst I was there, it was used by 3 or 4 people. So I am very pleased with the way that's going.
So just picking up on there's a couple of bits, sorry about this. Picking up on the increase from uplift, in your draft policing plan on page 9, you've provided the police workforce data, which has got obviously the establishment of 1,283 officers, and it says that 36% of those are visible frontline officers with a definition of that. So given the numbers that you talked about of 1,441, would you be making a commitment that that 36% by the end of this policing plan year is going to be higher? Bearing in mind the public's view in terms of not seeing police resources in terms of prevention, etc., and reassurance.
I'm not certain I can make that commitment because I'm treading all over the Chief Constable's ability to put those into place. What I will do, though, is say I believe that visibility is on the next agenda for this police and crime panel. And so I will come back and I'll give you the percentage of where that's got to by then. So I'm not going to tie her hands in that manner because that would be wrong of me and overstepping my jurisdiction.
Let me rephrase it then. You provide the money that comes from the public, and something you've always identified as well about visibility and reassurance was one of your key mandates when you went for election, still rightly is in your policing plan, still rightly becomes a topic of conversation if you listen to the public in terms of what they see as not visibility. With more police officers from Uplift, would you, as the elected representative, want to see that 36% be higher? Bearing in mind what you asked the public to do in terms of giving more money for that very thing.
Yes is the answer. And for example, the first 2 tranches of the uplift, something like 74% of them, a bit higher than 36%, has gone into community-facing roles. And I'm going to keep on around this issue with the Chief Constable. What I'm not going to do is commit that it's 36% until I've got the numbers and can show it's much higher.
Thank you. And can I add to that? Would you also agree that you would like to see this uplift, this increase in visibility in the rural areas as well as the urban areas? You would expect me always to be mentioning that, but we need to see the police out in the boondocks as well as in the towns.
Well, I've got to say, I wouldn't describe the rural parts of Dorset as the boondocks, but I am absolutely aware of what you're saying. To give you one small element of where some of the uplift has gone, before I came into office, there was only 3 people in the rural crime unit. Really good officers doing the job they could. There is now a capacity for 18. It has come up with leaps and bounds. They are fully resourced. So that's just one specific element in the rural communities. But yes, the answer is that I see Dorset as a whole, and I expect police to be a universal service, and I expect it to be able to service everybody in Dorset from the point of view of their police officers. So I hope that answers the question, reassures you, and I'll keep saying it for as long as I'm here.
I'm sorry, it is my last one. You'll be glad to know about that one. In terms of my last meeting, it's not my last question. Dog with a bone. The bottom line is that if you look ahead to next year, in terms of going for whatever you're going to set the precepts, I do believe that something that shows that it's been value for money in this last year is that 36% is higher. And I think without that, I think it's going to be a hard case to make out in terms of trying to keep the levels up. So that's where because unless I've got it wrong, the council's no better than me. I'm just a punter who pays his council tax. But with that bare figure there in your policing plan, I would like to see that much higher, because I hope that would equate to more visibility, which in turn increases reassurance and in the end prevention, I assume. So I suppose I'm making an early bid there to try and make the case that, I think the public would want to see more on that percentage, because that's what they'd like to see. Some of their money spent on, not all of it.
I think we're talking about the same thing here. Yeah, I think we absolutely are. Look, I've already said the first 2 tranches, 74% went into community facing. That's bigger than 36%. I think the phraseology of the first question, that's why I push back on. I am absolutely certain that we will basically exceed that number in the police and crime plan. But I have to make it also not just about the numbers have gone into those places, right? Because they could go into that places, we could have 100% into those places. But unless they are out there, unless they are visible, unless they are engaged and connected, then it means nothing. And so that's why I'm going to keep pushing on this and make certain it happens. Because it's not and never is about the numbers. It's also about having changed the culture to fit with the new police and crime plan.
Yeah, but it still goes back. You need the people in the first place to change things, don't you, as well? So I think we're agreeing to agree in a slightly different way, I think. Yeah?
Oh.
Yeah, I could see that follow-up question coming. That was the thing, Ian. One of the areas I think these statistics suggest could be a room for improvement is in communication between the police and the community. And I just wanted to pick up on the point that my colleague, Councillor Kelly, raised about the structures in Bournemouth North. Those structures are not replicated in Bournemouth South. We recently had an email from the inspector about that situation and seeking to suggest meetings, but also pointing to issues with a particular staff shortage. So my question really is, how would you be able, as BC, would you be able to help in applying pressure on the Chief Constable to ensure that the proper structures are in place in Bournemouth South to ensure better communication between the police and the community?
So one of the things I'm very clear about is that sort of thing, if I was written to, I would raise it as a community concern. But your first port of call is to discuss it with the inspector and see where you are with that from that point of view. And then it's not to bring it to this meeting, because that's very much a local issue for you, but to raise it with me outside the meeting. And then I will see what can be done from the point of view of asking about it, understanding it, and coming back to you with an answer. It may be that there is a temporary hiatus because of somebody's promotion, for example. But actually, it's not appropriate to bring that here, because that's a very local issue to you. From a general perspective, I talk to the Chief Constable all the time about what resources are occurring, have we got enough to do this sort of job, those sorts of things. So please bring that to me separately. I think I do know about it, because I think somebody else raised it with me recently. So I think it's on my agenda. But if you haven't spoken to the inspector to undertake what is actually happening, as I say, it might be somebody's promotion, which is called a temporary hiatus, then please do that first, and then come back to me and write to me, and I'll see what can be done.
I mean, I do understand that point, but if you're looking to improve the overall visibility of the police and improve those statistics, then one of the issues that you have to look at is the structures that are in place across the police force to improve communications between the police and the public. So the structures that exist, I think, are essential to understand how those can be improved in order to increase those statistics. So I might have a local issue which I can take up, but if you're looking to improve the overall performance, then you need to look at the way in which the police interact with the community.
Well, in the first instance, I take issue with the word poor performance when I've improved from 61% to 66%. What I will agree with you is that this is a work in progress and much more needs to be done. And this is the oil tanker which occurs. I do look at structures when appropriate with the force on a general issue. You've asked a very specific thing about your local area, which you need to talk to your local inspector about in the first instance. And then if there is an issue, and it doesn't look like that is going to be addressed in the near future, then by all means come to me and make a representation, and I will basically look at what I can do in order to support you. That's where we are with this. I am very clear that I'm not going to step in and order the Chief Constable to do X in Y geography. That is not my job. I can't do that. I'm overreaching from the point of view of a Police and Crime Commissioner. She would quite rightly tell me to take a hike. So it needs to be done in the right way. First of all, ask the inspector, then come to me, raise it as a community concern, then I'll see what can be done. But it may be that this is a short-term issue that you have locally.
Okay, thanks, Patrick, for raising that. And obviously, you've got a response, and you'll be able to take that up with the Commissioner out with this Pan Dorset meeting. So thanks for raising that. Ian.
Conscious of time, Mike, so two I'll leave off, but you'd never expect me to leave because we've been talking about it for 11 years now, and that's where the police service is with airwaves and a national 101 system, because both those things undermine all the things you're trying to do, of which they're outside your remit in terms of individually, but they're not outside the APCC's remit. And that seems to me still undermining all the good work you're trying to do and the police are trying to do. So I suppose it's where are we with those two things?
Okay, that's a good one. From the point of view of Airwave, I'm very clear that there's been little, if any, progress. I'm looking at my team here. No, it's the same as last time, I'm afraid. There has been no progress. The APCC will continue to lobby around this to try and get this resolved. There is an APCC meeting tomorrow at which I will see whether there's been any progress, because the two entities who would be involved in it are on the agenda, and we'll see where we go from that. So I'm frustrated as you are around that one. What I can do, and there's an old psychology equation which says worry about the things you can actually control. And that's what I'm doing from the point of view of pushing the visibility and connectiveness and engagement.
I think we're back. How's that?
Hello?
It often happens if someone
That's thrown me now. Thanks for that. I think where it is within your worry is the financial cost of trying to cover for. It's more budget, isn't it, to cover for the spare parts, and it's that impact that it has on the finance that we've got to. Every year we're hearing an amount that would appear to be going up all the time because the parts are becoming scarcer, and there's going to come a point where there ain't going to be no parts if they don't get a grip at the Home Office. And I think that's where the risk is, isn't it? It's how, unless I've misunderstood it.
No, that is where the risk is. Do you have any further observations, Simon, from your perspective on this one?
The position is as it has been for some time now. So the position is that the Home Office is still unable to say when the proposed change for the ESN, which is the Emergency Services Network, the airwave replacement, to take place. It was due to come in board by 2020, then 2022, and now 2026. The position that Mr. McVie says is entirely correct. The airwave system, the radios that the police use are currently long past their replacements. We are running out of spare parts because they're no longer made. It is a difficult one. It is sat with the Home Office. There have been some issues around the Competition and Markets Authority because of the nature of the supply chain. There's been some issues there which Home Office is working through. National Audit Office has also been involved to try and unpick the process and try and make progress. But we are still where we are, which is very much in the lap of the Home Office directing and owning this national project.
I know I'm going to hand you a hand grenade because I'm leaving, but it's most probably in the year ahead you're going to get the financial side in February, and the 101, I think that's going to come back because, again, it's a nationally delivered thing that ain't seeming to happen, but it undermines all that local PCCs are trying to do with chief constables.
I think the term is spares obsolescence. It's going to bite before long. Tony. Sorry, Alison.
Yeah. On the indicators, there's a rather familiar one which concerns me, and that is the average 101 answer time. 17 minutes doesn't seem to have improved much since I was whinging about it many years ago in another place. And wondering whether the resources are adequate for the 101. I know I advise residents to use the email system because that at least puts something there. Because if someone's waiting 17 minutes, they will do as I've done in the past and give up on making that call, which could be very useful information. So I'm wondering whether there's a resource issue here.
I am conscious that we have done 101 to death. So within 30 seconds, Commissioner, can you give Tony a response, please?
Yes, I can. 30 seconds is difficult to do the justice to the complexity. Yes, we've put in more resources. Single Online Home, the website, is far better than the clunkier Dorset operation that we had before. That is the way that we're asking people to report now. There is some work to be done around it from the point of view of communication to the public, which I've asked the force to do. Getting this number down is one of my biggest issues. The problem we've got is that the people there will also deal with the emails, the single online home inputs, and the phones. The emails, 50% of them were causing a significant amount of work because there wasn't enough information. So you suddenly had long conversations to even get to the starting blocks. Single online home will change that. So that is slightly longer than 30 seconds, but it is very much a journey. I'm not comfortable with the 17 minutes. It was 45 minutes when I did it, when I was a candidate. At least it's got better than that. But I want to move faster on it if we can.
Supporting Councillor Trent's statement. You may or may not know that the email has been withdrawn and is no longer available to use. I personally think that that's a bit of a step backwards. Lots of my community residents use the email precisely to avoid the 17-minute delays. We, as members, set out some basic parameters that you need to provide: a name, an address, a time, and some basic information. It does feel like routes to public communications are contracting with the removal of something so useful and so well respected by the community.
The single line home service will give a far better service to the community because it will direct them to the exact place they need to be from the point of view of having made the report. The issue, as I said, with the emails, where there was a significant problem, not just for the police from the point of view of the resource required to have the conversation to get to the starting blocks, but also for the person, because they weren't being directed to the right place in order to get the right solution. I think, and I've been blunt with the Dorset Police about this, is that the email was removed too quickly without communication. And there should have been a time period around that communication. Dorset Police have learnt from that. And that is why when I spoke to them recently about a way of improving the experience for the customer, if you like, they've taken it away. They now have a system where they can feed in improvements. So I echo your frustration about the way it was done. It is right that it is done. And I can only hope that residents, once they start using single online home, will find the benefit, because they will get a faster service overall from Dorset Police because they'll be going to the right place.
That's a very quick response. Is there any signposting or education available for residents? I believe at the moment most of my residents are completely unaware of single online home.
So thank you. That is useful information for me. That is useful feedback. We will take that back. That is exactly the point that I spoke to Dorset Police about recently, is there wasn't enough communication about it in the first place. There wasn't communication before the email was removed. And the last point is, I'll be honest about this, from the point of view of using it, there has to be communication about the difference between a report and intelligence. So some people will just want to tell us that something's happened, that there's some intelligence that the police could use. That is under the section which says, tell us about it, not the section which says report. And I have told, asked Dorset Police to sort this out from the point of view of communication at the meeting that I had with them yesterday. So overall, it will be a benefit. Getting there and communicating is the piece that needs to be improved. And I've spoken to Dorset Police about it. I hope that helps.
Do you have any follow-up question, Alistair?
Sorry. Yeah, I've literally learnt today that the 101 email doesn't exist, because I've been advising people to use that. And I'll give you a perfect example of where something like that comes into use is that motorcycles on Heathland is a major problem. If they dial 999, and some people have, because it does present a danger to life and limb, they're gone and they're in another area by the time anyone could reasonably respond. And therefore, I'd say, report it to 101 so that at least people are aware of it. Because I know from experience that if the police have knowledge of where this happens, when it happens, they can often set something up and catch the perpetrators. But at the moment, it sounds as if, apart from the website, which I've got to find out about myself, there isn't anywhere to go with reports like that still need to be made, but can't be made in the way that, gets an instant response.
So what Devon and Cornwall found when they did the same thing recently was they found that actually what it did was it freed up time on the phone 101. So that is the game plan, is that if we can ask our residents to use a single online home, and for that instance that what you're talking about, if they're not actually there, they're not reporting a crime against them as a victim, then the tell us about it part of the website would be the area that they would use. If everybody did that, then that would free the phones up for those people who can't go online. And that's the idea, so that the phone 101 should improve from the point of view of those numbers. Remember, this is 2 quarters ago, and single online home has only come to its full fruition, and the removal of the email has only occurred in the last few weeks. Now, regarding the communication around that, I was very clear that had to be sent to all stakeholders. So there should have been a letter to all the councillors in order to have spoken about it. If that was missed, then we'll have to look at that and check how that happened. Yeah, I don't know. It may have been pre-election, so that may be the issue. Okay, I think I'm kind of done on this. It's an oil tank and we've got to keep on pushing at it. That's where I am with it.
You should change my advice to people accordingly.
If it's reassuring, I had to change my advice as well because I said exactly the same thing in meetings.
Alistair Keddy, Queen's Park BCP again. With the departure of the Deputy Chief Constable announced yesterday and a relatively new Chief Constable being in office only since February, does this pose a continuity risk to the strategic delivery of the police crime plan?
No. We have very good senior officers in Dorset. The fact that the Deputy Chief has decided to pursue her career somewhere else, that's what happens in policing. We already I discussed it with the Chief Constable as soon as we became aware that that was likely to be the aspiration. There's already a plan in place. We will be moving apace in order to look at how we fill that. I have some, quite frankly, awesome senior officers in the next tier down amongst the Assistant Chief Constables. The plan is more than one individual. The most important individual in making certain this plan is achieved, other than myself for having it in the first place, is the Chief Constable. And clearly, part of the interview process with the Chief Constable was having had the vision of Dorset Police changed so it fits with this police and crime plan, which is what the people want, will you stick to that vision? And very clearly, absolutely, that's what she's driving for. And I've been able to achieve other things which I know that the people want since her being in Dorset, which I hadn't before. For example, to take one thing, the reopening of the front offices, which I've been trying to get off the ground for 2 years. So We thank Sam Derea for her service to Dorset. We wish her well with her ongoing career. I am absolutely reassured by the conversations I've had, not just with the Chief Constable, but with other officers, that we will continue to barrel forward in order to address this police and crime plan.
Priority 3? Oh, did you have a further question? No, priority 3, please. Succinctly.
Priority 3, succinctly, crumbs. The high harm priority, violent crime and high harm. Again, I will pick out some of the highlights. Very clearly, one of the big ticket items, which I discussed earlier with the Combating Drugs Partnership, the fact that we were able to land during this quarter the agreement to go forward and to recruit the role of the CDP business manager will be a real asset for Dorset going forward. It was also here that we basically conducted a self-assessment of the Combating Drugs Partnership, and that showed that Dorset was performing well nationally. And one of the issues, I think, which I didn't talk about earlier, I would like to bring to your attention is you need the 3 arms. You need the 3 bits in order to address drugs in our society. You need the enforcement, you need the treatment, but you also need the prevention. 30% of CDPs across the country do not have prevention as part of their work. And I think that's missing out. We have a very well-established multi-agency prevention subgroup, which already has been able to get over £250,000 worth of funding into Dorset in order to drive forward. So from a big ticket item point of view, the CDP was one of the things that happened this quarter. I also supported the force around, this was also the time where we were moving forward to address internal issues around violence against women and girls. So very clearly we wanted the Call It Out campaign to be embedded in the force. This reminds everyone in Dorset Police that it's their responsibility to call out unacceptable behaviour and it signposts colleagues to various methods to do so. I do know that it has worked extremely well with people using it. I also was updated on the progress of Operation Encompass. This is the school safeguarding information sharing programme. So now all mainstream schools, both secondary and primary, are signed up to this. So they receive safeguarding information. So this is where, for example, a child may be a witness of domestic abuse. That is then flagged to the school, ready for them to be able to wrap their arms around the next day in order to help with things like that. The last one I will cover here, which was the serious violence duty. I worked with the specified authorities to establish local governments arrangements, funding allocations, and an initial project plan to get that up and running in Dorset. And I'll leave it there, Chair, in the interest of time.
Thank you. Patrick, your lead.
I just wonder if there's any timescale related to that work, please.
The serious violence duty? Yes, absolutely. So I had an initial meeting with the partners involved. I think it was earlier, no, it must have been last month, actually. And they will be bringing back their plans for review and funding in September. And then it will move forward. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, maybe possibly later under a different category. So September is when I'll see their plans and what they're going forward. It is September when we will be able to start allocating the funding, I presume. Yep. So September.
Any further questions? On to priority 4 then.
So priority 4 is very clearly around fighting rural crime, coming back to Councillors Jesperson talk earlier. Look, I mentioned the rural crime team, where they are. You should also be aware that now we very clearly have rural resources which are being applied to them. I've made it clear that if there is something they need, to talk to the force in the first instance and to make me aware as well. And we also have something, it used to be called the Rural Crime Reduction Board. It's changed its name. I asked for its name to change to be the Dorset Partnership Against Rural Crime. That is specific because it allows us to work together with other partnerships against rural crimes across the country. It seems daft us having a slightly different name if we're all trying to do the same thing. So we have more join up at a national level. We also have had the first Southwest conference, which Dorset Police hosted on rural crime. So that also is new. Highlights during this month was we had wildlife crime as the deep dive for the Partnership Against Rural Crime. We also had heritage crime training was delivered by Historic England to 18 Dorset police officers. And we're one of the exemplars in the country for that. I think I will leave it there in the interest of succinctness.
Thank you very much, Les. Any questions? Les?
Just got the one here. Thank you. Following the South West PCC's lobbying government on penalties for fly tipping offences, can the PCC provide an update on the Minister's proposals, please?
Thank you. Yes, I welcome the opportunity, to be honest. The Dorset Rural Crime Reduction Board, as I said, was launched. We changed its name and we agreed a range of actions, one of which is to raise the profile of the impact of fly tipping on landowners, the public, and the Dorset countryside and wildlife. And we wanted to highlight the need for tougher consequences for offenders. This was basically around the fact that to get it delivered to somewhere really beautiful and make a mess didn't cost very much. And certainly a skip, the fine was the same as a skip. It was ridiculous. As noted, I've been working with PCC colleagues across the Southwest to target these issues. So basically, I said to them, let's do something about fly tipping. Let's see what we can do together. They all agreed. We went forward. In January of this year, the 5 Southwest PCCs sent a letter to the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Therese Coffrey. Now, when we did that, we told the National Rural Crime Network of our intention, and they publicised it to all the other PCCs and various other parties. And some of the other PCCs climbed on board and agreed that this was something which we should all be howling about. What we said was we wanted to increase the maximum fixed penalty notices for small-scale fly tipping to £1,000. That, to us, was one of the most critical issues. We wanted to change the maximum fine of £50,000 to become a minimum fine to be imposed on repeat large-scale offenders. We wanted a greater use of powers to impound and destroy vehicles involved in fly tipping. We wanted to introduce a national waste crime offenders list for individuals and companies. We wanted to support and fund the creation of a national analysis resource to enable the police to effectively collect and analyse data on fly tipping in rural areas and to tackle organised criminal gangs profiting from fly tipping in the countryside. So that's what we asked for. Pleasingly, as part of the wider ASB measures which was recently announced, the government announced the minimum fine for fly tipping was being raised from £400 to £1,000. Big tick, thank you. The maximum fine for those who litter or graffiti will increase from £150 to £500, so that's good. The maximum fine for those who breach their household waste duty of care will increase from £400 to £600. So those changes will come into force on 31st of July. And in addition to increasing the upper limit on fines, the government has launched a consultation on ring-fencing the receipts from fixed penalty notices for litter and fly tipping to fund local authorities' enforcement and clean-up activities. That will be really welcome. Because when I talk to my partners, one of the barriers for a local authority doing more in this space is obviously funding. So that will include spending the money raised from fining criminals on further enforcement, for further enforcement offences. It directly will go back to sort out the damage that it causes, or into other efforts to prevent it occurring today. The disappointment, I guess, if there is one, is that the large-scale offenders, the maximum fine isn't there, and a national waste crime offenders list isn't there. But they have outlined proposals to publish league tables for local authorities based on their fly tipping performance, which is useful. And the proposals also set out that more support will be given to local authorities and policing to aid with removing vehicles. And how that works is they're going to remove the need to have the regulator present when a police officer seizes a vehicle unlawfully carrying waste. Look, I know already Dorset Police would be absolutely delighted to seize vehicles being used for this purpose. Removing that barrier means they can do more. So there's much work being done by the Dorset Partnership Against Rural Crime. This is one of the successes of having 5 PCCs who are able to work together in the Southwest and think the same way. There are others, but that's not appropriate for now. And so fly tipping, which is a wicked problem for our beautiful county, I think there's a little bit of a more move forward with those results. I'm very pleased they've happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for those encouraging words, Commissioner, with regards to fly tipping. My question is the Hampshire PCC involved in the 5? Because you're well aware that the ward I represent, the rural aspect of it abuts the Hampshire county boundary. And I just wondered what relationships were in terms of the PCC and the rural crime teams of Dorset and Hampshire. Thank you.
I am very aware of your ward, sir. And from the point of view of the 5 PCCs in the Southwest, no, they're not. But when I came into office, I was very clear that I would not only look to the Southwest, as historically we have always done. I would look and make certain that all of those forces on the edge of Dorset, we had a good and fruitful relationship with them. So what I did was I met with the PCC for Hampshire, her senior officers. I took my senior officers and we met just over the border in Hampshire, on the road out of Christchurch. And we very clearly had a fruitful discussion about how we could work together more. The rural crime teams work together very well. The neighbourhood policing teams work together very well, and there is good join-up. An area which I am championing with the other 5 PCCs and will go into Hampshire as well is about join-up around intelligence sharing around rural crime, for example. The idea being is that if they don't see borders, nor will we, and we're looking at how we can share that intelligence better. So it was already in a good place. I made certain it was going to stay in a good place and get better. We're now looking if there's anything strategic that we can do better still. So I hope that gives you some reassurance around that.
I would also like to commend the measures and the increased fines against fly tipping. It not only blights rural communities, but urban members will understand just how much it blights our neighbourhoods in the conurbation. My ward of Queen's Park has particularly bad issues with fly tipping, which lead to environmental health issues with rats and other problems. Currently, it is enforcement of fly tipping in the urban areas is outsourced to a private company called Wise. Would there be intelligence sharing between Wise and the rural crime team? And also, I'm assuming that these new measures apply as much to the urban areas as they do to the rural areas.
Yes, absolutely. Although this particular issue is cited under my priority 4, it applies equally to the urban areas. So from that perspective, and certainly the lobbying wasn't just for urban areas, it was for everywhere. The whole of Dorset on my part and the whole of the other counties, etc., for the other PCCs. From the point of view of from the point of view of WISE and their sharing, I believe that is the case. I certainly know that I have officers from BCP who come to the D Park, and they actually gave us a synopsis of WISE at the last meeting and how that was working. And obviously Dorset Police are there. So I would anticipate that if there is a necessity for enforcement to be done beyond WISE, then they would work with Dorset Police.
Move on to priority 5.
With priority 5, so there's a number of things I draw your attention to here. Firstly, there's been an increase in the OPCC funded of offender tags. So the Police Integrated Offender Management Team have utilised these, and we're seeing a total of 22 offenders being issued tags in the quarter with no breaches or offending reported. So I'm very clear that the idea of tagging is a good one. I'm supportive of it. There is a national push on, for example, the idea of the sobriety tags for those who have had a conviction for an alcohol-related crime. I am encouraging probation to do their pre-sentencing reports and to make certain that they include any addiction issues for the person in front of them, so as they can get the help that they need. The importance of, for example, the sobriety tags are that those not only help society as a whole, but they also help the individual to actually stop drinking as well. So I just want to highlight that. The other one that I'll highlight is over on the right-hand side regarding hate crime. I'm very clear that the People First Forum does a really, really good role supporting and advocating for victims of crime with disabilities. So what it does is it basically supports for both hate crime and other crimes which occur with people with disabilities, helps them go to court, helps them from the point of view of representing them if they would prefer that. I've actually made certain that the grant continues because it was going to fall away. And that I've also funded specialist autism training as well around neurodiversity. The last one, very quickly, I've commissioned several community support packages working with young people on the cusp of crime to make certain that also gets addressed. So that's 3 of the kind of highlights in this space. Thank you.
Any questions based on those, Eric, outlined for the PCC? No. So moving swiftly on then to make every penny count. You and your team and Dorset Police Finance have managed to take an overspend, predicted overspend last quarter, back to underspend this quarter or end of year. Can you provide a succinct view on how this 1.2 million turnaround was achieved and provide reassurance to the people of Dorset that public-facing services have not been affected?
Thank you, Chair. Are we doing the questions before I say my little bit about priority 6? Thank you. So a couple of highlights here in making every penny count, which is why, forgive me, I thought that I should basically put these out there. During this quarter, basically, we had to recruit a new chief constable, and I was very clear what I wanted. I wanted somebody who would do a number of things. I wanted somebody who had eaten the whole of the police pie, wasn't just a detective, wasn't just neighbourhood policing, understood public order, understood all the facets. So a competent, experienced chief officer. I wanted somebody who basically didn't just come from one force. I wanted somebody who'd had a range of experiences. And critically for me, it had to include forces similar to Dorset. And also, I wanted somebody who would understand the diversity of Dorset. Not just, and very importantly, the diversity of those with protected characteristics and the importance of those communities and what they needed, but also the community as a whole. The difference between what's needed in Bournemouth, an urban area, to what's needed in Sturminster Newton, a market town, to what's needed in Langton Herring, a village. So I wanted somebody who understood urban, coastal and rural. And finally, and most importantly, I wanted somebody who understood the police and crime plan, and the presentation back to me of it and how they would improve it was critical to the interview process in order to drive forward and deliver that and keep the operational vision as it was. I just wanted to make that point because there was a lot of work done by my team. We actually put in place a recruitment package which had 6 applicants for shortlisting, more than I think anywhere else nationally, and we had 3 stunning candidates to take forward, and we picked the best one. I think the only other thing I'm going to do here is confirmation was received from the Ministry of Justice that the Core Victims Fund and associated funds will be renewed, totaling 1.35 million. So this is a wealth of money which goes in directly to help us deal with our responsibilities for victims. I just wanted to highlight that point. And that, I think, I will leave it there in that case. You'd like me to answer that first question? I will absolutely do that. Hang on. Okay. So the first question related to the £500,000 overspend prediction and how carry forward requests will be carefully managed in this year. So several factors have contributed to the turnaround in the financial position. The overachievement of the uplift target generated an additional grant of £160,000 as a result of recruiting 8 additional officers over and above our uplift target. That is incredibly significant because actually if you went below the uplift target, in effect you were fined. So I'm very pleased that we went over and got that. Significant focus has been placed on financial management and awareness across the force, working with budget holders to drive out efficiencies. So in effect, we've created even more scrutiny to make certain that we are driving down costs and getting value for money, with the creation of an efficiency board to oversee reductions in spend required for the 23-24 budget. This has led actually to a cultural change. There's much greater awareness across the force of the financial challenges, which has, for example, led to a slowing down of staff recruitment. This was often a conscious decision in order to provide greater challenge through a vacancy review panel to whether the role to be recruited was in a key area or whether the role could be filled in a different way. There have also been instances of being able to recruit when roles were advertised due to a slower employment market. I've been unable to recruit when roles were advertised due to a slower employment market. This has not, however, impacted on frontline service delivery. Now, the other thing the Efficiency Board did was it also oversaw challenges to reduce IT license fees by scrutinising the number of devices allocated to individuals and making certain that items not utilised, so basically reducing waste in the system. For example, recalling desktop machines following the issuing of laptops during the pandemic. We don't need to pay for licenses for things which aren't being used. We also started to see the result of the changing culture of the greater financial awareness. Budget holders have been more questioning of whether spend was required. Could it be delayed or could it be done differently? Always keeping at the forefront of their minds the importance of ensuring operational delivery. The ongoing challenge of managing overtime also started to produce results. And even though overtime was still overspent overall, the BCP area managed to come in under budget for the first time. In terms of the carry forward requests, they've been agreed to be transferred to the Budget Management Reserve, but they'll require further authorisation to come out of the reserve to make sure that the request is still the right priority for funding. So in effect, a second gatekeeper approach in order to make certain that it is actually needed to do the job it does. We know that 2023-24 will be a challenging year financially, and therefore we need to respond to any changing priorities should they arise. So it's really, really important that we keep control of the money in this manner, and we have these extra processes. And this overall process will be overseen by the Resource Control Board, which is a joint Force and OPCC board. So we are completely wedded in to getting this done. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much. So following on from that, on the same theme, arguably, every year there's an inordinate slippage in the capital programme, as you well know. I suppose the question really is, when are you going to take a deep dive into this area in order to grip the situation?
Thank you for that question. Look, slippage is a common feature of most capital programmes, which typically contain projects and programmes for multiple years, and they don't fit neatly into financial years. Previously, for example, we had issue with the vehicle replacement programme, and the work we've done through the Capital Strategy Group has resulted in this being much more accurately forecasted, despite really difficult circumstances. So, what about ICT? Well, the Capital Strategy Group had a robust discussion about this year's level of slippage, both for estates and ICT, at the meeting in April. In particular, whilst there were some projects which at Q3 were reasonably expected to complete by the 31st of March, but were then unavoidably delayed, there were some areas where delays could have been highlighted earlier. Our contributions to national IT projects, such as Emergency Services Network, also fall within this area. The accuracy of forecasts will remain a focus for the Capital Strategy Group as we go through the year. So in answer to the question, the deep dive occurred in April. It was gripped. It will continue to be gripped as part of the ongoing process, albeit with the caveat around the Emergency Services Network, which you heard earlier.
Thanks very much for that. I think it's also worth pointing out that the police vehicle procurement changes arguably fell out of a deep dive from this panel. I'm getting shakes and nods of heads from all your team, by the way. You now hold your personal purse, not your personal, but your office's purse, now holds £1.7 million in reserves. What do you believe is a suitable threshold for reserves in this area, and what plans are in place to utilise some of this taxpayers' funds in the next financial year?
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this in particular. There are no set thresholds for earmarked reserves. It's down to local circumstances and judgments. The funds are held in 3 reserves. So the legal reserve, that's one of them, is for legal support for officers under specific circumstances where the OPCC has a duty to provide support. We have a maximum level we believe this should have. We're about approaching this level, and there's no cases currently needing support, so we won't go above that. We will keep that in reserve. You'll be aware that legal costs, if they do come, can be prolific, let's put it that way. So we'll be happy to keep that at a certain level. The second reserve is from the OPCC office costs and will be used for additional pieces of work, specialist skills, or pump priming new projects. One of the things that we have had a difficulty in the past year, which we addressed earlier in the year, was the issue of recruitment. We were struggling to recruit people. That has now been addressed, and we now have some of those people in place, such as, for example, a person managing our bids now. So we've got a bid manager in place. So that second reserve is there for additional pieces of work, specialist skills, or pump priming new projects. So that will gradually play out over time, depending on what's required. The big one, right? Big one. The main reserve is the Police and Crime Plan reserve. And that holds a balance of just over £1 million. And that is deliberately there for a very good reason. This panel, those who have been on it a long time, will know that since I came into office, something I have said that Dorset badly needs is a violence reduction unit. For those who do not know what that is, it is basically a unit which takes a public health approach around violent crime, primarily around young people with knives, for example. I have been frustrated for a number of reasons around this. Number one is that the government has seen fit to give 22 areas across the country money to set up a VRU, and indeed money for something called Project Adder, which is also around the issue of addiction. Because, dare I say it, we are one of the safest places in the country, because we're in the bottom 10 for knife crime, because we do not have the level of firearms issues in any way that other areas have. They do not see us as needing a violence reduction unit. I've been very clear, this is about prevention. This is about making certain that our young people who are carrying more knives we address that particular issue. Now, to give you where we are with this, I was hoping to land it last October and November. It's a bit like the Combating Drugs Partnership. It needs a multi-agency partnership approach. And primarily, it needs an approach with BCP in order to address it. Last October and November, we thought we had a deal in place to go forward where we were co-funding. That, unfortunately, fell apart. So I have this significant fund and I want to co-partner. I have made representations with the new leader of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. It's on our agenda for our regular monthly meetings. When we've started getting it landed there, I want to expand it across Dorset as a whole. But we need to get it off the blocks. One of the factors is a serious violence duty and where that money is being used. So that's why I want to see those plans in September. And then following that meeting, when we know what's there, we will know what gaps we need to plug in order to get a comprehensive and sustainable violence reduction unit for Dorset. So whilst it looks like I'm hanging on to the money and not spending it, I am absolutely certain that we will be spending it as soon as I can get that off the ground. And I'll be looking to have significant meetings in September, October to do that. So I hope that gives you some reassurance, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Pete, question.
Yeah, thank you for the last comment. It's really good to see somebody talking about prevention. And the question is, not for now, but is there anything this panel can do to help you get a violence reduction unit set up?
Councillor Barrow, I would ask every councillor to make representations to their leader to work with me, to find a bit of money down the back of the sofa and to come together and really make this a reality for the people of Dorset. So you asked how you could help. Yes, please. I mean, we've got a number of new councillors here for BCP. If you could clear the logjam, that would be fantastic. I know that you equally want Dorset to play. It would be utterly brilliant if we could come together and get this done. Whatever happens, however we get there, I'll make certain that we do whatever we need to do for the people of Dorset, but it would be great if it could be a collaborative partnership as we've been able to work with in other areas. Thank you very much indeed.
Peter Sidaway from Broadstone. I just wanted to clarify the amount you might be looking for in partnership, given the financial predicament of BCP at the moment. That's going to be a significant factor whether we can do much to help you with that.
It will, sir, but let me put it this way. What could be a bigger priority than keeping our people safe and making certain our young people don't carry knives for the future and don't fall into that situation? So it is about priorities. I'm not going to name a number, it's not fair. Because I'll tell you why, because what we need to do is work through what we've got with the serious violence duty in September and see what gaps need to be plugged.
Thank you. I don't disagree. I have children of sort of 17 to 21 that fall into the bracket that are finding themselves in trouble. But there are, of course, many areas. But even just a scale would be interesting, but appreciate that.
Chair, just to clarify, the Dorset Council Constitution's got a limit of 3 hours for meetings, and I'm conscious that we're approaching that. Rather than interrupt the next item mid-flow, can I suggest we seek approval to extend beyond that now? If so, we just need somebody to propose. And a second. And a quick raise of hands, if that's okay. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that quarterly update, Commissioner. And I hope the questions have been useful and flushed out some areas of interest to you and also the panel, and more importantly, the people that are watching this. We move on to item 6. I'm mindful, as Mark has just pointed out, of time. The panel has read the paper, so therefore there's no need for you to go through in detail on the paper. You can pick out maybe 1 or 2 salient points, and then we can maybe go into questions. I'll hand that over to you.
We could, if you wanted to, Chair, go to the questions on the assumption the panel has seen it and it has been made public, so the public may have seen it, or I can pick out certain sections. I don't mind, I'll do it either way, but I'm just trying to give you help with the timing.
Is the panel happy to go straight into questions? You've read all the papers? Yeah, okay, good news. So moving into questions then. First off, before I even start the questions, can I take this opportunity to thank your staff for producing an excellent report, as always. May I also say that the key lines of inquiry that were provided by the panel have all been answered in the paper. I'm looking up to make sure everyone, yeah, I don't see any dissent with that at all. So there are some questions that have fallen out. Starting with the PCC, I yourself, to be congratulated on obtaining funds for additional CCTV cameras in nighttime economy hotspots. How's the funding of the additional monitoring staff managed? And is there any data to prove that these cameras drive down violence and criminality? Or is there prime benefit providing evidence for successful prosecution of perpetrators?
Thank you, Chair. Well, CCTV cameras are proven to prevent crime, aid with the detection of offences, and also assist with public order scenarios. They're a recognised and evidence-based tactic that is endorsed by the College of Policing. And I have seen academic studies which actually show that they do the job that they do. The cameras in question have received funding through separate rounds of the government's Safer Streets Fund. In 2021, a successful bid enabled BCP Council to install CCTV cameras in 8 areas, which have been directly affected by crime, including Christchurch Road in Boscombe, Christchurch Road in Folkestone, and Southbourne Grove. In 2021 and 2022, we facilitated 5 new cameras at the Marsh, 5 new cameras on the Rodwell Trail, and an additional 10 cameras in Weymouth Town Centre. This funding also provided for additional daytime CCTV monitoring officers and an expansion of the Dorset CCTV control room. By using a centralised CCTV control room, it has been possible to expand CCTV provision throughout the county without incurring huge additional staffing costs. Of course, while the cameras have already been used to assist with prosecutions and also to assist with live incidents, it is notoriously difficult to prove the prevention of crime, not least to isolate the effect of individual tactics, bearing in mind the many preventative measures being undertaken simultaneously within the NTE, as outlined in the paper. So I think the problem is pinning it down to CCTV. Having said that, in areas not necessarily in nighttime economy, we do know that CCTV does prevent crime. So I'm confident that the addition of these cameras not only helps keep people safer in town centres, but also helps to make people feel safer too. And Chair, you may wish to note that I am working with other areas in Dorset in order to try and help them join up to that Dorset CCTV control room. For example, Lyme Regis and other places where I'm also helping them with a little bit of funding in order to achieve that goal. I advocate for the use of this tool in keeping people safe. Thank you.
How are the additional monitoring staff managed and funded? How are the additional monitoring staff managed? So obviously somebody's watching these cameras. So who funds that and how is it managed? Is it outside of your bailiwick, for instance?
So the benefit of this particular scheme, Chair, is that the existing control room through Dorset Council can be used. So the new cameras are bought and they're tied into the existing monitoring scheme. So we don't need additional monitoring staff.
Just more TV screens? Okay, thank you. Any further questions on that particular area at all? No? So moving on, what action is taken when premises are linked to the illegal supply of alcohol, nitrous oxide and vapes to young people?
Okay. Simple answer to that, any such premises who do that basically risk losing their licence, facing a fine or even facing a prison sentence. And I certainly have spoken to the force regarding the importance of robust monitoring and enforcement action in these instances. And that was the point I was making earlier, is the force will make recommendations. They don't make those recommendations lightly to licensing committees. And I hope that I have the support of local authority licensing committees that when the force do make a representation, that it should be taken very seriously from that point of view. Of course, it's important to stress that it is actually local authority trading standards that enforces legislation, which prohibits the supply of most age-restricted goods. Trading standards are responsible for a programme of education to businesses, alongside test purchase exercises for the substances that you have mentioned. Indeed, last year, you may recall that Trading Standards discovered that a large number of premises in Dorset were selling e-cigarettes and vaping products to children without adequately checking ID. They then work with a wide array of partners, including licensing and community safety teams, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs and Dorset Police. Alongside this activity, the Dorset police officers will also seize any contraband materials that are discovered during the course of their duties or as a consequence of intelligence received. You will, I am sure, have read about occasions in which neighbourhood officers, alongside licensing and trading standards colleagues, have confiscated vapes and nitrous oxide canisters. We won't tolerate the illegal use or sale of controlled substances, and you'll know, Chair, that I'm particularly worried about the high harm that such substances can cause young people. In fact, with my national portfolio, myself and my co-chair were instrumental in getting the Home Secretary to review the situation around nitrous oxide and the fact that it will now become an illegal substance. That does help. I think the other thing I'll say is that I'd also commend the work of our police cadets who on occasions have helped from the point of view of test purchasing in order to understand the complexity of this problem. I'm very clear that any premises who like to think that they can do this, tough enforcement action should be taken against them.
Thank you for that. Any sort of follow-up questions on that?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment on the Dorset Police's licensing team who work very effectively. They bring issues before BCP and Dorset Council. And for example, we shut down one of the nightclubs in Weymouth that was the creation and the source of a lot of the antisocial behaviour and crime. And I believe working in partnership makes a difference. It keeps people safer.
Thanks, Les. Good stuff. Final question on the paper. Sorry.
Sorry, I was going to respond to that. Oh. Thank you. You are absolutely correct. I'm well aware of that situation when that nightclub was shut down, and I applauded Dorset Police for doing it. I have also sat with Dorset Police in the nighttime economy. They have weekly meetings in the summer over in BCP in order to discuss issues. I'm very clear, and I've spoken to the licensing team. I will support such moves if they make them, because it is about keeping the people safe. And premises, quite frankly, are making a lot of money out of having a license. They have a duty to respect the conditions which those licenses impose on them. And those that don't should be shut down. Simple as that. Thank you.
You've highlighted previously that you've initiated the Combating Drugs Partnership. How are you monitoring the sort of overall effect of this partnership in driving down drug-related crime? There has been an independent review, I'm aware of, but how are you ongoing monitoring the success of this partnership?
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's two main ways which I'll come to. Combating drugs partnerships are still in their infancy, but as per the comments I made earlier, further guidance have come out. We have the Drug Strategy National Outcomes Framework, which was published on the 23rd of May. Both the headline and supporting metrics will be used to monitor progress towards these outcomes. That is across all three areas, so not just treatment and impactful prevention, but also, as you say, enforcement. That has been very clearly understood by the partners. I updated several panel members at length about some of these metrics last week. These measures include a number of criminal crime and criminal justice indicators. But that's only one way that I can basically monitor how we're doing. You will be aware that there are a number of drug operations which now occur, which did not, before the Police and Crime Plan, put it very much on the agenda. One is Operation Scorpion. That is where the 5 PCCs across the Southwest come together, and they said that we wanted a priority for the Southwest to be hostile to drug dealers and antisocial drug takers. And the 5 forces stepped up and came up with Operation Scorpion, where we put a ring of steel around the Southwest every time it's done, but we also pick on different themes. People may be aware that the current theme is that of cannabis farms, and very clearly there are some measurables there which we can grip onto, such as the number of plants taken, the number of arrests made, etc. What I will say regarding Operation Scorpion and this general piece is we know it's working. We know that we have had over £1 million worth of drugs taken off the streets since it's been operating. We know first 2 iterations alone arrested over 230 people. They safeguarded over 530 individuals. We know that when it comes to disrupting organised crime groups, Dorset is 4th in the country for doing this. So we know that that is working. But if we go a little bit further, Operation Viper, our local solution, using part of the uplift that we talked about, that's where neighbourhood policing teams and neighbourhood enforcement teams are addressing community drug dealing and county lines. And I'm very clear that that also is working, with 21 county lines actually closed in the last year. So I monitor it in 2 ways. I have monitoring systems around Viper and Scorpion, but on top of that, they are also reporting regarding the metrics within the Combating Drugs Partnership. And look, less formally, as co-chair of the APCC Addictions and Substance Misuse portfolio, I'm really in a lucky position because I can see if best practice is coming from other areas, if there's things that I can take from that, bring back to Dorset. And what I can tell you is that Combating Drugs Partnership is in many areas performing extremely well and ahead of the curve. I'll know more after Thursday this week when I have my next meeting with the policing minister and other ministers to look at progress. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that that is something which is very much top of my agenda.
Thank you for that. Any follow-ups on that? No, thank you. So moving to the final question based on the paper you presented, you kindly presented, shall I say, and this chimes with what's being discussed earlier on, to be honest, but it's a bit more focused. What action has the PCC taken in order to gauge public perception on the, and I quote from the report, assurance of the additional officers' visibility in Bournemouth and Weymouth?
Thank you. That's a really good question. I could wax lyrical and say a lot in response. I know that you're going to have a deeper dive into police visibility for the next meeting. So if I can attempt to be brief, if I may, regarding that. Let's first start from the point of view of summer policing. So from the point of view of the summer policing plans for both those areas. I have seen with the Chief Constable what those look like. It includes extra patrols, in both areas. Weymouth has been having the 100 days of summer as part of it, and I hear that that's going well, for example. Bournemouth very clearly has new officers which came in May, and I hope to see those visibly on the ground. I actually spent time recently on a Friday night with police officers in Bournemouth, talking about their work, going out with them, seeing what they were doing. And that was both those officers who were dealing with Operation Fireglow, which is the operation in Bournemouth Gardens around young people, but it was also the response officers, the response team, seeing how they were dealing with 999s, etc. And they had very clearly got the message, which I have been reiterating to the Chief Constable, that it's not just about doing the things, it is about being seen to do the things. And I spoke to an awesome sergeant in response who was very clear that she expected her team to be visible and out and about. Now, both those areas have needed significant increases in police visibility. And it is really important that we do that and we start doing it now to change the legacy of not having anybody in those areas. So it is not just about the visibility of the officers, but it's also about the assurance provided to the public as a result. Public trust and confidence is affected by a wide range of factors. And some of those are national. Some of those I can't address from here. What I can do is say to you that I believe the visibility of officers is one of the things that can provide additional assurance. And their legitimacy derives from doing the job they've been asked to do for the people, so delivering the plan, and being seen to deliver the plan. And everybody said to me before I came into office they wanted greater visibility. I know in some places it is beginning to land, but it needs to land everywhere. It's a hard thing to quantify and assess because some people won't just be happy to see officers in an area. Some people actually feel more at risk if they see officers in an area. So there is this dilemma also. What is actually needed is those officers to be seen to take the actions to prevent crime and keep people safe. That's how we get this done. There are several methods I intend to use to gauge the public perception. First of all, I'm very clear that I engage with the business investment districts, the hoteliers, the other stakeholders. I basically talk to them on a regular basis. I also ask that any councillors who have issues that they're aware of and they have spoken to their local neighbourhood policing team, the local inspector, as I said, if then that isn't happening for them, if there isn't the engagement they want, then by all means come to me and I will make representation as a community concern around that. So I do it myself, I do it in face-to-face conversations, public correspondence, I go out and I attend meetings, and my office undertakes literally correspondence with thousands of residents every year. Second, we do the quarterly satisfaction surveys carried out by the force. And third, through the annual consultation that my office undertakes during the summer, this asks members of the public for their opinions on police visibility. And they will be both in Weymouth and in Bournemouth in the coming months. And I'll be assessing the feedback received this year compared with that collected last year. I will, Chair, keep on this because for some areas, this will be a legacy issue of years and it will take time for it to change. Nevertheless, by the end of this year, those 1,441 officers will be out in Dorset. And from then on, I see there as being a real sea change for what we're trying to do. And the public have to feel that. So that's where I am with it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And not to preempt the good work I know Alistair is going to do on the subject for the next meeting. But I think the key thing really is, and not for you to answer now, but for the next meeting, is what action is really being taken to reach out to the public to see what they think, what they feel about policing. I say not for now, but I'm sure Alistair will do the key lines of inquiry with your team and come up with a good line of approach. Right, I'm going to draw stumps on that paper. Once again, can I thank you and your team for producing the paper. As always, it was excellently written, clear, succinct, and to the point. If I could move on to item 7, PCC annual report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the PCC annual report, we delivered that to yourselves as the panel. I want to thank everybody for the inputs that we received back. It is now out there. I commend it to the panel and indeed to the public. We will be actually doing a small synopsis of it called a 2-year-on leaflet, which I have copies for the panel before they leave. And my team will be making certain that we get that across the county as far as possible so people can see the good work, not just of my office, but of Dorset Police as well, going forward. So thank you. I don't think I want to say any more about that.
Thanks for that. I'm sure nobody's got any questions on that. So moving swiftly on, item 8, complaints update. If I could hand finally to the chair of the complaints subcommittee, Mr. Ian McVie.
One update. We have dealt with an appeal to a complaint that we met on, the subcommittee met on the 21st of June this year. The original complaint was one where the individual had challenged the evidence used by the PCC concerning alleged gateway drugs, and this included where the PCC had appeared before the Home Affairs Select Committee in June of this year. And also that, in his view, the complainant's view, that is, the PCC had breached the Nolan principles. The complaint was dealt with as per the legislation and with our own protocol or policy, whatever word you want to use, and the Chief Executive from the OPCC dealt with that and provided a full and comprehensive response and rightly dealt with it under the informal resolution process that is in the legislation. So we had an appeal to that by the complainant in terms of the decisions taken, and the subcommittee met. We were satisfied that the legislation had been followed, the policy and procedures had been followed, and that the decision, whilst the complainant will never agree with the PCC's view and vice versa, there was no breach of the Nolan principles, and quite rightly the OPCC resolved it in the correct way, which is no further action. We did, though, identify some administrative changes that we need to make to the protocol around timeliness so that we come in line with the host authority for the PCP's office, which is Dorset, so that we're in line with their complaints policy and procedures. And Mark will cover that in a separate item in terms of what we would want to do. So as we sit now, we have no outstanding complaints and there's no appeals either. So we're sitting with nothing for the new sub-complaints committee to deal with.
Thank you very much, Ian, as always. So, Mark, we've got some voting to do, I believe.
Yeah, so as Ian has referenced, there were some changes made to the protocol. They've been included with the papers. So really, we're just looking for somebody to propose accepting those changes, assuming they are accepted and seconded. Yeah, thank you. And raise of hands if everyone supports the changes that have been made within. Excellent. So that's the protocol approved. The other recommendation within the report was around appointment of members from the panel onto the complaints subcommittee. The proposal was made ahead of this meeting, actually, to delay that decision to the next meeting, and that's to allow the appointment of a further co-opted member to be considered as part of that elections for the complaints subcommittee. So just sort of an element of reassurance there. If it's necessary to convene the complaints subcommittee in the interim, we would seek reserve members from this panel as is permitted by the protocol. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I mean, ideally, we would like to have a co-opted independent member sitting on the complaints committee as well to give us a clean, independent stance as well. Moving on, item 9, forward work plan.
Thank you, Chair. So again, forward work plan is included with the papers. There's one slight change to the agreed programme for the September meeting. It's been touched on during the discussions today, and that's for there to be a focus on visible policing in the community, in addition to the scheduled item on the PCC working with schools. There are, as we know, quite a few changes to the panel membership, and what we will be looking to do as a panel is a focus session in September on the forward plan to ensure that it continues to focus those areas that the new membership would like to scrutinise further. So we'll do that bit of a work in September. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. And there are no urgent items, to the best of my knowledge. No? And there is no exempt business. No, thank you. So next meeting is on the, whenever, in September. And I would stress that we've got the training day on the 26th of September, which we're going to arrange for an external speaker. Well, we have arranged for an external speaker to come in, and I'll also do a presentation on Spotlight Scrutiny Reviews as well, primarily for new panel members. And the date is? 20 or 28, something like that. Anyway, it's in your diaries. Does anybody have any further points before I close this meeting? No. Looking at the PCC, any points you'd like to make at all? No, thank you. Then thanks very much for everybody's time today, and I look forward to seeing you again in September.